As soon as I stepped into the wedding garden, the very moment I expected to see my daughter walk out in her white dress, I froze. Hanging right at the entrance under 2 rows of glowing golden lights was a large board with a photo of me and my husband. Underneath, in bold letters sharp as a blade, it read, "Do not let these 2 people in, by order of the bride." I stood motionless while my husband, Mark, went red, then pale. Guests glanced at us with puzzled looks, but they didn't know one thing. This entire wedding was secretly paid for with my own money, and they also didn't know that just a few hours later, I would destroy this ceremony in a way no one could ever imagine. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Evelyn Carter, 61 years old, living in a quiet town in Ohio. I never thought my life would lead to a day like this, standing at the entrance of my own daughter's wedding, treated like a stranger, even forbidden to step inside. That feeling didn't even resemble sadness anymore. It felt like someone had ripped my heart out, placed it on a scale, and declared that I wasn't worth a single cent in my daughter's eyes. We had driven more than 3 hours to get there. Mark prepared a small speech, folded neatly and tucked into his suit pocket. I had spent the entire night before wrapping a little wedding gift, a white lace handkerchief my mother left me, a family heirloom. I wanted to give it to my daughter on the most important morning of her life. Every small hope vanished the moment I saw that wretched photo. I turned to Mark. His eyes trembled in a way I had never seen. We'd been married for more than 40 years. I'd seen him angry, exhausted, defeated, but never hurt the way he was at that moment. "Evelyn, what is this?" he whispered, his voice breaking. I couldn't answer. I just stood there, my head spinning, my legs glued to the ground. A young hotel attendant walked toward us, his face full of worry. I'm really sorry. I was instructed that if the 2 of you showed up, we can't let you in. This is a direct order from the bride. I bit my lip until I tasted blood. The bride he referred to was Madeline Carter, my only child, the daughter I once held through long, feverish nights, the daughter I worked 2 shifts to pay for through college, the daughter I thought would hug me tightly on her wedding day. No, she chose to hang my picture outside the venue like I was a wanted criminal. Guests passing by glanced at us, some avoiding eye contact, others staring out of curiosity. I felt like I was standing in the middle of a public square, being stoned by the very person I raised. I squeezed Mark's hand. "Let's go," I whispered, my voice hoarse. He nodded. Neither of us said another word. We quietly turned away, each step heavier than the last. Every step felt like another cut to my heart. I heard the wedding music drifting from afar. The gentle violin sounded as if it were mocking my humiliation. When we reached the parking lot, I couldn't hold myself up anymore. I stopped, leaning against the car door, trying to breathe so I wouldn't collapse right there. I didn't want Mark to have to catch me like someone whose bones had just been shattered. "Evelyn, are you all right?" Mark asked, his voice trembling with worry. I pressed my lips together. "Mark, I really don't understand. Why would she do this? Why today, of all days?" He looked at me and shook his head. "I don't know, but standing here won't change anything. Let's go back to the hotel." We got into the car. Mark started the engine, but his hands were shaking. I placed my hand over his, searching for any warmth left in this moment of devastation. As the car rolled away from the dazzling wedding garden, I looked through the window. Everything behind us still looked beautiful, perfect, while inside, My heart had shattered into 1,000 pieces. On the way back to the hotel, I tried to stay calm, but tears streamed down my face. Images of Madeline as a child replayed over and over, her messy blonde hair on school mornings, her bright laugh running across the yard, the tight hug she gave me the first time she earned an A. I once believed those sacrifices would be the bond between mother and daughter. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe when a child grows up with everything, she might accidentally see her mother's love as an obligation. I never imagined I had raised someone who could treat me as a burden. I tried to comfort myself. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe Madeline didn't know. Maybe someone else hung the sign without her knowing. But deep inside, I knew the truth. Madeline knew. Madeline agreed. Madeline wanted this. I remembered the months preparing for the wedding, the moment I transferred $92,000 to the event planner, money I had saved for more than 30 years. I remembered how relieved I felt knowing my daughter would have the perfect day she dreamed of. I hid it from Madeline because I thought if she knew I paid, she would feel embarrassed or guilty. I hid it out of love, out of a mother's instinct to protect. But today, standing forbidden at the wedding entrance, I realized my daughter didn't feel grateful at all. She saw me as a debt, or worse, an embarrassment to hide. The car stopped in front of the hotel. Mark turned off the engine, but he didn't step out. He turned to me. "Evelyn, I know this hurts, but you have to understand. She's not the little girl we raised anymore. She changed when she got involved with the Whitmore family." I looked down at my hands, the veins raised, the faint calluses from years in the laundromat. I had built my entire life around Madeline. I never imagined the child I raised would be the one to push me out of her life on the most important day she had. I inhaled deeply. "Mark, did I do something wrong? Or are we just too poor, too ordinary for them?" Mark placed his warm hand on my shoulder. "No, Evelyn, we didn't do anything wrong, but sometimes being endlessly kind makes others think they have the right to walk all over you." I nodded, but inside me, something shifted, a feeling both painful and cold, as if a new door had opened, and behind it was a version of myself I had never dared to become, a version of Evelyn Carter, who would no longer bow her head. I looked out the window toward the golden lights of the wedding still flickering from afar. "Mark, you know what? I think I've been too gentle." "Gentle?" Mark frowned. "Yes," I said quietly. "I think it's time I take back everything I've given away." He stared at me, trying to read my thoughts, but even I wasn't fully certain yet. I only knew one thing. Tonight, I would no longer be the woman who endured humiliation in silence. A frightening yet clear idea began forming in my mind, slowly, quietly, but powerful enough to make me shiver. If Madeline wanted to erase me from her life on her most important day, then I could show her exactly who held all the real power over this ceremony. And I would not shed another tear. I sat silently in the hotel room, my eyes still slightly swollen after hours of holding back tears. But as memories flooded back, I no longer felt humiliated. Instead, I felt hollow, as if an invisible hand was opening each drawer of my past, forcing me to look closely, from where I started to the moment I lost the very child I raised. I was born in a tiny town in northern Ohio where winter winds blew so cold the window glass froze every morning. My family was poor, not the kind of poor where you skip a few luxuries, but so poor my parents burned scrap wood and cardboard to keep us warm. I grew up surrounded by the hum of an old heater and dinners of thin soup. But my father taught me the most important thing. being poor wasn't the same as being worthless. And my mother taught me that a woman must stand on her own 2 feet. I carried those lessons throughout my life. When I married Mark, we started from nothing. Mark worked as a delivery driver for a furniture company. I got a job at a small laundromat on Main Street. The pay was small, but we saved every cent by cutting every expense possible. I became familiar with the smell of detergent, the damp chill of clothes straight out of old machines. My youth lived between heavy laundry baskets and hours of standing on aching legs. But it didn't matter, because when Madeline was born, every sacrifice became something I wanted to do. Madeline was stunning from day one. Soft brown hair, blue-gray eyes she inherited from Mark, and a smile that made me forget the scent of bleach still clinging to my hands. From the moment she could walk, we gave her everything our limited means allowed. I remember waking early to make pancakes before school, coming home from my shift and stopping by the thrift store to find her a little pink dress she would love. I wanted my daughter to grow up with what I never had, safety and enough. Madeline was brilliant. At 7, she read faster than her classmates. At 13, she won a small state science award. I cried with pride when her teacher told me, "Mrs. Carter, your daughter is exceptional." But sometimes I knew I spoiled her more than necessary. I justified it as making up for my own childhood. I thought loving more meant she would love me more. I was wrong. When she got into college, Mark and I worked harder so she wouldn't feel limited like we once did. I took on a second job cleaning offices at night. Every day I left the laundromat at 5, ate a quick sandwich, then worked until late. In winter, when snow piled thick and my back throbbed with pain, I still pushed through because I wanted her to have a future brighter than anything I could imagine. I don't remember how many hours I worked each week. I only remember holding that first $5,000 tuition bill and crying because I had actually managed to pay it. Madeline knew I worked hard, but as she settled into college life, her calls became fewer. First several a week, then once a week, then only occasionally. I understood. She was becoming independent, living the life Mark and I had worked so hard to give her. I didn't resent it, but I will never forget the day she graduated. She wore a black gown, a square cap, and honor cord around her neck. When she looked at me and Mark, she beamed, a smile I once thought I would never lose. "Mom, I did it," she said, and I cried in the middle of the campus lawn. I was proud, so proud it hurt. But pride lasted only a short while. After she started working, Madeline came home less. Her stories centered on coworkers, clients, business trips, fancy events in Columbus and Cleveland. We became background figures, appearing only during holidays. Then one day she called to say she wanted to bring her boyfriend home. I hoped he would be kind, like Mark, someone genuine, hardworking, steady. But when Andrew Whitmore stepped through the door, I knew immediately that my daughter's path had taken a sharp turn. Andrew was the type of man who believed he was above others. Expensive suit, gleaming watch, a voice polite yet cold. He shook Mark's hand with barely any pressure, then scanned our home as if assessing its monetary value. I disliked him instantly. But Madeline, she was dazzled. Her eyes lit up whenever he spoke about managing finances, his wealthy family in Chicago, vacations in the Florida Keys. I saw clearly she was mesmerized by a world we had never belonged to and had never sought. I stayed polite, joined the conversation, but felt the first needle prick at the bond between me and my daughter. The second meeting was worse. The Whitmore family invited us to dinner at an upscale restaurant in downtown Columbus. The moment I stepped inside, I felt out of place. White tablecloths, layered wine glasses, dishes, expensive enough to cover a week of rent. Margaret, Andrew's mother, looked me up and down and said, "Oh, you made it." Polite words, cold tone. All dinner long, she questioned my laundromat job, not out of interest, but superiority. Andrew spoke about the family's business investments, elite social circles, exclusive events. Every sentence implied that Madeline was moving up into a world far above us. Mark tried to stay composed, but his eyes often dropped to the tablecloth, anger mixed with resignation. That night, riding home, I sat in the back seat silently asking myself, what had I created? How had I raised a child who didn't notice the disrespect from the family she was marrying into? I never found an answer. Madeline's changes came gradually but clearly. She visited less, called less. When she did come home, she talked only about Andrew, where they went, who they met, their elevated plans for the future. Not once did she ask if I was still working 2 jobs, or how my health was, or if Mark was doing all right. The distance grew, and for the first time in my motherhood, I feared losing my daughter. The turning point came when Madeline announced Andrew had proposed. I wanted to be happy, but her smile wasn't the smile I used to know. It was the smile of someone stepping into a life where we were merely shadows behind her. That was the first small crack in my heart, a crack that the sign at the wedding entrance shattered entirely. I sat on the hotel bed holding the lace handkerchief, asking myself, how did I raise her for her to remove me from her life in the most brutal way? But that question had no time for answers, because a harsher truth settled in. Today was merely the result of a long chain of hurts. Hurts I had ignored because I kept telling myself my daughter still loved me the way she once did. I didn't know then that all of this was only the beginning of deeper pain and betrayal waiting ahead. I was still leaning against the hotel headboard, gripping the lace handkerchief as if it were the only thing keeping me from falling apart. Memories of Madeline and years of raising her twisted together in my mind, carrying me toward another moment I should have recognized sooner, the first dinner with the Whitmore family. Looking back, it feels like the first chapter of a book I wish I had never opened. That afternoon, I woke earlier than usual to clean the house. I wanted our small home to look warm and tidy. I baked apple pie, Madeline's childhood favorite, thinking it might make her feel like she was coming back to the home she grew up in. I polished the wooden dining table and placed a vase of white daisies in the center. Mark went to the grocery store for extra drinks, nervously asking me, should I wear the blue shirt or the white one? I laughed and said, either one, Mark. They're coming to meet us, not interview us. He chuckled softly, but I knew he was anxious. Both of us wanted to make a good impression on the man our daughter had chosen. When the doorbell rang, my heart pounded as if I were preparing for an important ceremony. Madeline walked in first, her hair softly curled, her face glowing. She gave me a quick hug, then stepped aside to introduce Andrew. Andrew wore a charcoal shirt under an expensive blazer, and his shoes were so shiny I could have seen my reflection in them. He smiled and extended his hand, but his eyes swept across my living room as if he were checking the value of every item. I had never liked that look. It wasn't the look of someone curious or wanting to know his future wife's family. It was the look of someone appraising merchandise. Wonderful. Thank you for having me, Andrew said, his voice polite, crisp, and a bit too perfectly measured. I invited them to sit and brought out the apple pie. Madeline took a bite and smiled, a rare smile I hadn't seen on her in a long time. But Andrew only tasted a small piece and said, "Oh, very homey." His tone sounded both like praise and like a subtle suggestion that my baking wasn't quite up to standard. Mark glanced at me, and I just smiled as if I hadn't heard anything. But the moment I went into the kitchen to pour tea, I heard Andrew whisper to Madeline, "Too sweet. You know I don't like old-fashioned baked goods." Madeline let out a soft laugh. "Mom's been making it like that forever." I stood there behind the kitchen door for a few seconds, feeling the air around me disappear. But I walked out again, keeping my smile, convincing myself I was being oversensitive. It was the first meeting, I reminded myself, and I wanted to believe Andrew was simply a little snobbish, not a bad person. I was wrong. A week later, Andrew's family invited us to dinner at an upscale restaurant in downtown Columbus. I had already felt uneasy when Madeline called earlier and said, "Mom, just wear something comfortable." That sentence made me anxious. Her idea of comfortable was nothing like what comfortable meant for me. I chose a simple navy dress Mark had given me for our anniversary. It wasn't brand name, but it was clean, lovely, and appropriate. Mark wore the blue shirt I had picked for him last time. We walked into the restaurant. Warm, dim lighting, soft violin music, the faint scent of wine drifting through the air. I felt like I was stepping into a world that wasn't meant for me. The Whitmore family was already seated. Margaret, Andrew's mother, looked up and scanned me from head to toe. Her gaze lingered slightly too long on my shoes, then moved to Mark, then to the inexpensive handbag I was holding. "Oh," she said, lips curving faintly. "Very simple." I heard her clearly. Everyone did. But Mark gave a polite smile, and I tried not to let the heat of embarrassment rise up my cheeks. Dinner began with questions disguised as small talk, but laced with condescension. Margaret asked what I did for a living. I answered honestly. I worked at a small laundromat near our home. She raised an eyebrow. "Ah, that must be quite tiring." I knew that tone. People used it when they didn't want to openly admit they looked down on your job. Then she turned to Mark. She asked whether a delivery driver's salary was sufficient. The question carried no kindness at all, and I saw Mark's back stiffen and his hand tighten around the napkin. Meanwhile, Andrew talked about his family, about their investment companies, about parties in Chicago, about real estate projects I couldn't even understand. Every word he said felt like a reminder of the distance between their world and ours. Margaret looked at Madeline with calculated pride. "She's so smart, so beautiful. She deserves a better future, don't you think?" I knew exactly what she meant by a better future, and I knew she said it deliberately in front of me. But I stayed silent. I didn't want to make Madeline uncomfortable. Mark, unlike me, couldn't hide his emotions well. He kept glancing at me, his eyes filled with frustration and helplessness. But he restrained himself. For Madeline. For what was supposed to be a beautiful evening. A little later, Andrew took Madeline's hand, kissed the back of it, and announced, "I've proposed to Madeline. My family will take care of the entire wedding. We want a ceremony that matches our standards." Madeline nearly teared up with joy. I felt my heart beat slow, not because I wasn't happy for her, but because something inside me suddenly sharpened. Something was wrong. I couldn't explain it. It felt like a cold draft down my spine, like an alarm quietly going off in the back of my mind. I looked at the Whitmores, the perfect smiles, the arrogant eyes, the polished words, and I knew nothing here was genuine. Not the promises, not the generosity, not the welcome they pretended to give Madeline. And it didn't take long for that intuition to prove itself in the cruelest way possible. The days after the dinner in Columbus, the uneasiness stayed with me. It wasn't a sudden blow like lightning. It was a slow, creeping fog settling into every corner of my thoughts. I tried to deny it, telling myself my daughter was simply growing up, stepping into a world I wasn't familiar with. But then, one afternoon, Madeline came to my house. And the moment she spoke, I knew the change wasn't small anymore. I had just finished my shift at the laundromat, my hand still carrying a faint scent of detergent. Madeline walked in, dressed neatly as if she had just left an important office meeting. I invited her to sit in the kitchen, where I had prepared 2 cups of mint tea, our old habit whenever she visited. But this time, she didn't look at the tea, didn't ask if I was tired. She only leaned against the counter, crossing her arms as if she were preparing for a negotiation rather than talking to her mother. "Mom," she began, her voice light as if hiding something, "Andrew's family has decided they'll cover the entire wedding cost." I forced myself to stay calm. "Oh, I see. Yes, so you and Dad don't need to worry about anything." She said it with a relieved expression, as if she had just dropped a burden she'd been carrying. But that relief pierced me. Since when had our lack of wealth become something that embarrassed her? I nodded and smiled. "If that's what you want, I won't object." Madeline hugged me briefly, then left almost immediately. When the door shut behind her, the house felt strangely cold. I stood still for a long moment, a nameless weight pressing on my chest. Something wasn't right. I picked up the phone and searched for the event planning company Madeline had mentioned the night before. When the staff answered, I tried to sound casual. "Hi, I'm the mother of the bride, Madeline Carter. I'd like to ask about the event cost." The woman quickly opened the file. "Yes, the estimated total is $92,000. But we haven't received any deposit or payment yet." I went silent. I had to take a deep breath before answering. "None at all?" "That's correct. We're waiting for the contract holder to make the transfer." When I hung up, my hands were ice cold. So the Whitmore family never planned to pay. Every generous promise had been a performance. A show meant to make Madeline feel lucky to be marrying into their world and to make her believe they were a stronger support system than the parents who raised her. I sat down, staring out at the backyard where the old maple tree stood, silent as if listening, and the only thought I had was, if they won't pay, what will happen to the wedding? And worse, did Madeline know? Or was she also a victim of their shiny lies? I couldn't let my daughter be humiliated. No matter how much she had changed, no matter how much it hurt, I was still her mother. And a mother doesn't let her child fall in front of hundreds of people. That night, I called the event planning company back. "Yes," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll pay the entire cost, but one condition. Do not tell anyone, including the bride, that I am the one paying." The staff member hesitated, then agreed. I transferred the money in 3 large payments, amounts I never imagined I would spend in my lifetime. When it was done, I sat alone in the dark living room, listening to the dry ticking of the wall clock. I had emptied nearly all the savings Mark and I had built over 30 years, money meant for our peaceful retirement. But the part that hurt most wasn't the money. It was knowing that if Andrew or the Whitmores claimed later that they paid for everything, Madeline would believe them immediately without asking me a single question. In the following days, whenever Madeline called, not to check on me, but to gush about how generous Andrew's family was, my heart shrank a little more. I heard her pride in things I knew were lies. I smiled through the phone, hiding the hollow ache inside. I wanted to tell her the truth, but every time I tried, I imagined her face, bright eyes, confident voice, blind trust in the Whitmore family. I feared she'd think I was jealous, or worse, that I wanted to sabotage her wedding, so I stayed silent. I told myself her happiness was enough, that she would eventually understand my love. But as time passed, she called less. Messages became shorter. "I'm busy, Mom," or "Don't worry, I've got everything handled." I felt myself being pushed out of the very life I had built for her. Stories of the Whitmores filled the space between us. She dined with them, traveled with them, attended their exclusive parties, never once inviting me. Every photo she posted made me disappear a little more. I realized then it wasn't that their world was too big. It was that they wanted mine to become too small for her to see. One morning, while I was folding clothes at the laundromat, Mark called. Madeline had texted that she couldn't come for dinner that weekend. She had a business networking event with Andrew's family. I only said, "It's okay, don't be upset." But inside, memories of raising her scattered like fallen leaves in a storm. Distance doesn't come in one day. It arrives from many quiet moments. Moments when I convinced myself everything was fine. Moments when I ignored hurtful words. Moments when I believed motherly love was a wall that could never collapse. But the wall had already fallen, and I stood among the rubble, not knowing how to make my daughter see me the way she once did. I didn't know then that everything I had endured was only the beginning of something far more painful and far more cruel, something that would lead to the moment I was humiliated at her wedding entrance, and then to the moment I decided to reclaim the power I had given away for so many years. I remember that afternoon vividly. Gray skies, heavy clouds, hanging low over Ohio like a warning. I stood in front of Madeline's apartment door for a long time before pressing the bell, not because I was afraid of being turned away, but because I feared hearing something that would hurt even more than what I had already suffered. But I knew I had to go. I had to talk. I had to understand what was happening to the daughter I had spent my entire life protecting. I inhaled deeply and rang the bell. The door opened within 3 seconds, and instead of Madeline, it was Andrew standing there. He wore a white shirt buttoned to the collar, holding his phone like whatever conversation he'd been having was more important than anything else. When he saw me, his eyebrows tightened. Just slightly, but enough for me to understand I was not a welcome sight. "Ah, Mrs. Carter." He glanced at his watch. "Madeline didn't say you were coming today." I forced politeness into my voice. "I just want to talk to her for a moment. Just a few minutes." Andrew stepped aside, though stiffly, as if he were letting in a delivery person rather than his future mother-in-law. I walked in, trying to smile, though the coldness in that beautifully decorated apartment made me shiver. It was elegant and perfectly arranged, but missing something I couldn't name. Warmth, soul, life. Madeline came out of the bedroom holding a thick clipboard. Her hair was pulled into a high ponytail, and she wore a sleek, smart band on her wrist. She looked at me, hesitated for a second, then said, slightly rushed, "Mom, I'm getting ready for a meeting with the wedding planner. What do you need?" A simple question, but not a hint of joy at seeing me. I forced a bright expression. "I just wanted to check if you needed any help. The wedding is coming soon." Madeline sighed. "Andrew's family is handling everything. You really don't need to worry." The way she stressed the word "they" made me pause. Still, I swallowed it down, trying to keep my voice steady. "What about our seating for the ceremony? No one from the planning team has contacted me, so I just want to be sure." Madeline glanced at Andrew as if seeking permission. Andrew shrugged, then answered for her. "There are many important guests from my family, so your table will be a standard one in the middle section. It can't be near the stage." I looked at them. 3 seconds passed. long enough to age someone. I turned to Madeline. You decided that? Madeline reluctantly nodded. Mom, there will be business people, Dad Andrew's friends. You understand, right? You and Dad still get a nice table, just not the main one. I once thought I was strong, but hearing that felt like a stone dropping onto my chest, not because of the seating, because for the first time, my daughter saw me as someone outside her life. I tried to keep my voice from shaking. And the tradition of your father walking you down the aisle? Madeline looked at Andrew again. That single glance told me everything. My daughter was no longer someone who would speak for herself. She was waiting for him to speak for her. Andrew cleared his throat. We're not doing that old giving the bride away tradition. Madeline will walk in alone. She's independent. It's modern. Madeline gave a small, awkward smile. You understand, right? I don't want to look like a traditional bride. The word traditional felt like a cold blade pressing into my chest. All those years I held on to traditions, family dinners, holidays, little routines that shaped Madeline's childhood, now dismissed as outdated burdens. I stared at my daughter, the same child who once ran through our backyard as Mark and I chased after her, the child who clung to me during nightmares, the child who cried when classmates teased her. And there she was, telling me. Everything I represented was an embarrassment. Why, Madeline? I asked softly. Why don't you want your father and me near you on your wedding day? She froze for only a second. Then she looked away as if searching for the kindest possible lie. It's not like that, Mom. It's just, there are certain images we need to present at the wedding. You know, Andrew's family does big business. I don't want to make them uncomfortable. I heard the meaning behind every word. I understood that we, Mark and I, did not fit the image my daughter wanted to display. I took a deep breath. Let me ask you one thing, Madeline. Do you still see your father and me as family? Madeline grew uneasy and turned away. Andrew stood right behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder, as if both comforting her and asserting control. Mom, don't make this a big deal, Madeline said. I'm very busy. Busy. One simple word, yet it drew a clear line between us. I found myself standing in my own daughter's apartment, feeling like every decoration and every color on the walls whispered the same message. You don't belong here anymore. I nodded. I understand. I turned around. Andrew didn't walk me out, and Madeline didn't follow. When the door closed behind me, I stood in the cold, bright hallway, my hands trembling, and then I cried. Not the angry, heaving kind of cry. It was the cry of someone stripped of the most sacred place she'd ever held in life, the place of being a mother. I cried so hard I didn't hear the elevator open. Mark was waiting for me in the car. When I got in, he saw my swollen eyes and didn't ask anything. He simply placed his hand over mine, lightly, but enough for me to feel the grief spreading through every part of me. I leaned my head against the window, watching the blur of cars outside. The air inside the car felt heavy as lead. Mark spoke softly. Evelyn, don't let her hurt you like this. I know how much you love her, but maybe she's not the little girl she used to be. I nodded without looking at him. But I still hope. On her wedding day, she'll realize how unreasonable she's been. I still want to believe that. Mark gently squeezed my hand. Hope is the last thing we should let go of. But deep in my heart, I knew that hope was already cracking. I felt like I was clinging to a rope that was fraying strand by strand, held together only by fragile belief. I didn't know that. Just days later, that same daughter would leave me standing before a wedding gate, staring at a picture that barred me from entering, and the heartbreak of this afternoon would become the final warning I failed to heed. 1 week before the wedding, when, under normal circumstances, I should have been counting down the hours until my daughter stepped into a new chapter, Madeline called me. I remember clearly. I was in the kitchen, just lifting the lid off a pot of chicken soup when the ICO phone buzzed. Her voice sounded calm, but underneath that calmness was something sharp, something only a mother who'd grown accustomed to disappointment could detect. "Mom," she said quickly, as if she had another meeting waiting. "I need your help with something." I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "All right, go ahead." And then, with one single sentence, she delivered a blow so staggering that even now, when I remember it, my chest feels hollowed out. "Mom, can you cut everyone from our side of the guest list? Andrew's family guests are increasing. I need to prioritize people. Important for my future." I froze. The spoon slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a small but echoing clang that filled the quiet kitchen like the toll of a bell. I couldn't speak for several seconds. I just stood there, trying to register what my daughter had asked of me. "Madeline," I whispered, my voice trembling like a child's first lie. "Cut? Everyone?" But they already received their invitations. "We double-checked," Madeline replied, still breezy. "Your list has a lot of people who really don't have anything to do with my new life. They don't serve any purpose for me and Andrew." It felt like a slap across my face, not because she wanted to cut guests, but because of how she spoke about the very people who had helped me raise her through the hardest years, the ones who brought over cans of soup when money was tight, who babysat her when I worked double shifts, who treated her like family though we shared no blood. "You're saying they don't serve any purpose for your future?" I managed to ask, though my throat felt like it was blocked with stone. Madeline sighed as if I was the difficult one. "Mom, don't make this heavy. It's my wedding. I want everything perfect. Andrew's family has a lot of important connections. You know that. I can't seat his father's business partners next to our relatives from Dayton. It just wouldn't look right." My hand began to shake. "But they're our family, sweetheart." Madeline went silent for a few seconds. Then she dropped the sentence that shoved me off the cliff. "Family has limits too, Mom. You understand that." No, I did not understand. I had always believed sacrifice was the language of motherhood, that if I loved her enough, she would know. But in that moment, I realized some children, when placed under glittering lights, forget the warm lamps that once kept them safe. Madeline continued, brisk and decisive. "Please notify everyone. Just tell them there's a seating issue. Make it sound polite for me." I leaned against the counter because without it, I might have collapsed. I couldn't believe this was the same little girl who once clung to my leg and cried when another child refused to share a toy. "All right," I whispered. "I'll take care of it." There was no thank you, no hesitation, just a quick, "Good, I'm busy, Mom." And then the line went dead. I looked around the kitchen, the towel, the chicken soup, the spoon on the floor. Everything seemed familiar, yet I no longer recognized myself. That night, I called each relative, my cousin, my 2 nieces, my elderly aunt in Cincinnati, Uncle Harold's family, people who had never once missed any milestone in our lives. And each time I had to repeat the lie, "Oh, it's just a seating issue. We have to cut back. Please understand." Every voice on the other end carried disappointment softened by kindness. "It's all right, Evelyn, as long as she's happy." I bit my lip until I tasted blood just to stop myself from crying on the phone. When I hung up after the last call, I couldn't hold back any longer. I set the phone down and let the tears fall. Not just tears of hurt, but of betrayal over how my daughter had trampled every value that once held our family together. Mark heard me crying and rushed in from the living room. He held me without asking because he already knew. He had seen the distance growing every day. I pressed my face into his shoulder, my voice breaking. "Mark, she said our family doesn't serve any purpose for her future." Mark closed his eyes, his hands gripping my shoulders. "Evelyn, I'm sorry. I know you're hurting, but you don't deserve this. You don't." I shook my head, tears falling on his shirt like ink stains. "What if we tell her the truth? You paid all $92,000. She wouldn't disrespect us like this if she knew," Mark said plainly. I stayed silent for a long time. Then I shook my head. "No, not now. If she finds out I paid, she'll shame herself in front of her new family. She'll think I did it to pressure her or out of jealousy. I don't want that." Mark looked at me, his eyes a mix of worry and heartbreak. "But if you keep letting her treat you like this..." I cut in softly. "On her wedding day, she'll see me there. She'll realize how wrong she's been. I believe that. The wedding will be the moment she understands." I said it, but deep down I knew that hope was fragile. So fragile that the slightest breeze could shatter it. I wanted to believe in my daughter so badly it made me foolish. I wanted to think that somewhere inside her there was still room for me. That night I cried until I was exhausted, until my eyes burned. I fell asleep with that tiny, flickering hope that the wedding would mend what had been broken. But I was wrong. When the wedding day arrived, I fixed my silvering hair, put on the navy dress Mark loved most, and held the small gift I'd wrapped all week. I stepped out of the hotel with my heart full of hope. Hope that my daughter would see me, smile, and run to hug me like she used to. Instead, when Mark and I stepped up to the garden gate, under the soft glow of golden lights, a massive sign greeted us. On it was our picture, and the bold, slicing words, "Do not let these two in, bride's orders." In that moment, the last drop of hope inside me was crushed into dust, and I, someone who once believed love was enough, stood there learning how to breathe again after having my heart shattered. I don't remember how I got back to the hotel. I only remember sitting stiffly in the car, hands trembling in my lap, unable to process any of it. Mark placed his hand on my back, rubbing slow circles, but the hollow ache in my chest didn't ease. It wasn't a pain of the body. It was deeper, hollowing. When Mark closed the door behind us, I collapsed onto the bed, burying my face in my freezing hands, and like a string pulled too tight, finally snapping, I broke into sobs, not soft sobs, choking ones, the kind that makes breathing impossible. Humiliation, grief, betrayal, confusion, everything crashed over me at once. Mark sat beside me, holding on to my shoulders. "Evelyn, we don't need to stay here. I'll pack our bags. We'll leave right now. We'll go home. Forget this ever happened." I wanted to nod. I wanted to say, "Yes, let's go." But inside me was a strange emptiness, as if I had lost a part of myself, and leaving now felt like admitting my daughter had the right to hurt me without consequence. I tried to inhale, but the breath dissolved before reaching my chest. "Mark, I don't know what to do." He stroked my hair. "We'll go home. You don't need to take any more of this." I was about to answer when my phone suddenly rang. Unknown number. Ohio area code, but not saved in my contacts. Mark gestured for me not to pick up, but something, I couldn't name what, made me reach for the phone. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice rough. A young woman's shaky voice came through, someone who seemed to have struggled before deciding to call. "Mrs. Carter? Is this you? My name is Chelsea Rivera. I'm one of the event coordinators at the Linden Garden tonight." I blinked. "Chelsea? I don't think we've met." "I know," she said. I heard her swallow, then her voice quickened. "But I saw what happened at the gate. I was standing inside when they put the sign up. I'm so sorry I witnessed it and couldn't do anything." I gripped the phone, my palms dampening. "You're calling because of that?" "Not just because of that, Mrs. Carter." Her voice dropped, trembling slightly. "I'm calling because I know you're the one who paid for the entire wedding tonight." My fingers went numb. How do you know that?" I asked, my voice almost colorless. "Because I checked the contracts before the event. Every receipt, every payment record, every signature, everything has your name on it. You're the only one who paid in full. There isn't a single cent from the Whitmore family." My heart thudded so hard I pressed my hand against my chest. A long stretch of silence passed between two breaths. Chelsea continued, her voice thick with hesitation. "And there's something else you should know." I heard her swallow again, as if bracing herself. 2 hours before the ceremony, I walked past the bridal suite. I overheard the bride and the Whitmore family talking. They were talking about you. The air around me froze. "Chelsea? What did they say?" Her voice trembled, but each word stabbed like a blade. "They called you trashy and poor. They mocked you for trying to act classy. They said the wedding would be less embarrassing if you didn't show up." My knees buckled, and I sank onto the bed. I didn't cry. I didn't have any tears left. Chelsea pressed on, her voice full of pity. "I saw the bride, Madeline, smile when they talked about the no entry sign. They said it would solve the problem once and for all." Mark heard enough to rush over and hold me, but I couldn't feel his warmth. I only heard Chelsea's voice, small but sharp as broken glass. "Mrs. Carter, I can't stay quiet, not when I know the truth. You have the right to cancel the entire event, all of it, because you paid for it, and you can do it at any moment tonight." I opened my eyes. The hotel room spun around me. I have that right?" I asked, sounding like a stranger to myself. "Yes, you're the contract holder. If you request the sound to stop, the lights to go off, the service to end, we have to obey immediately." For a moment I heard nothing but the rush of blood in my ears, like waves hitting rock. And then, for the first time in my life, I felt something I had never allowed myself to feel. Power. Not the power of money, the power of truth, the power of justice. The power that comes when someone is pushed so low that standing back up becomes its own form of strength. "Mrs. Carter," Chelsea asked, "are you still there?" I placed a hand over my chest, because for the first time in months, my heart wasn't just aching, it was awakening. "Yes," I whispered, "I'm here." "Would you like me to send over the document confirming your right to terminate the event?" I looked at Mark. He was watching me as if asking, "Evelyn, what are you thinking?" But I couldn't answer him. Not yet. Not when a door inside me, one I had always kept locked, was opening wider with every second. Chelsea spoke again, her voice steady and sincere. "Mrs. Carter, I know you're a good person, but sometimes good people need protection from those who take advantage of their kindness." I inhaled slowly, and an idea, terrifying but perfectly logical, began to take shape in my mind, a thought that the version of me from a few years ago would have trembled at and pushed away immediately. But the version of me now? I had been pushed to the very edge. I had been humiliated in front of strangers. I had been stripped of my place as a mother by my own daughter. I had been trampled on by people who saw me as nothing but weeds in their lives. And now, when Chelsea spoke her final sentence, "You just have to say the word, one word," I understood that my kindness had been stepped on one time too many. I understood that some lessons can only be taught through silence, and some lessons can only be taught through action. And I, the gentle mother who had endured all her life, began to see with painful clarity the path I had to take next. No more trembling, no more weakness, only one decision, cold, rational, and entirely mine. After hanging up with Chelsea, I sat still for a long time, still enough to hear the hum of the air conditioner and the faint traffic far below. Mark sat beside me, his hand resting softly on my knee, like a thread keeping me attached to reality. But inside, I knew I had just crossed a line I could never return from. "Evelyn," Mark whispered, "what are you thinking?" I lifted my head and looked straight into his eyes. For the first time throughout this ordeal, I no longer said, "I don't know." "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that it's time she understands that actions have consequences, not through words, through the one thing she's clinging to, this wedding." Mark was silent. He didn't rush to comfort me, nor did he try to dissuade me. He simply looked at me for a long time, then nodded, heavy, reluctant. "So, what are you planning to do?" I inhaled deeply and picked up my phone. My fingers still trembled slightly, but this time out of adrenaline, not fear. I opened the contact card Chelsea had sent. The hotel manager, Mr. Harris. I made the call. The phone rang a few times before a polite middle-aged man answered. "Good evening. This is Christopher Harris, manager at the Linden Garden. How may I help you?" "This is Evelyn Carter," I said plainly, "the person listed on all contracts for tonight's wedding. I need to confirm a few things." His tone shifted immediately, becoming more careful. "Yes, of course, Mrs. Carter. I have your file right here." I heard the shuffle of papers and the tapping of a keyboard. My heart beat steadily now, not fast, not erratic. For the first time, I felt myself speaking without bowing my head, without asking for permission. "I want to know," I said clearly, "whose name appears on every contract related to tonight's wedding, the venue, decor, catering, sound, and lighting." "Let me check," Mr. Harris replied. A few seconds later, he continued. "All contracts are under your name, Mrs. Carter. Every payment we received came from your account. There is no Whitmore name on any document." I closed my eyes for a brief moment. Hearing what I already knew, but from someone with authority, made it feel heavier, more final. "In that case," I continued, "legally, the person who has the right to cancel or stop all services during the event is me, correct?" A pause, then a quiet exhale. "Under contract principles, yes, Mrs. Carter. If you request that services stop, we must comply. But I must warn you, that would cause significant disruption." "I understand," I cut in calmly. "I am not asking you to do it now. I simply need you to confirm that if I call back and request all music, service, lighting, and venue use to stop, you will do so, correct?" There was something like respect, maybe even fear in his voice when he responded, "Yes, Mrs. Carter. If you, as the paying client, request it, I will proceed. But I hope you consider this carefully." "I already have," I replied. "One more thing. I want every decision, communication, and adjustment tonight documented. Emails, internal notes, all of it must have a clear trail." "Of course," he said. We will email you a confirmation. It will state clearly that you are the one requesting service termination." "Thank you, Mr. Harris," I said, my voice low. "I may call again tonight. When I do, I expect everything to follow what you've just confirmed." "I understand, Mrs. Carter," he answered, "and I'm sorry for what happened at the gate. No mother deserves that." I didn't address the last sentence. I simply said, "Have a memorable evening," and ended the call. Mark stared at me, eyes wide. "Evelyn, you're really going to do it?" I turned to him. "Do you think I have another choice? She dragged me to the lowest point she could find. If I stay silent, I'm only teaching her that she can trample others without consequences." Mark put his arm around my shoulders. "I won't stop you. I'm only hurting because I know tonight will be the final nail in the door between you and her." I nodded softly. "That door? It's been locked for a long time, Mark. I just refuse to admit it." I straightened up and pulled my laptop closer. The light from the screen reflected off my tired, calloused hands. I opened a new email, typing with a calmness that almost frightened me. Recipient: Margaret Whitmore, Andrew's mother. Subject: regarding your family's generosity for tonight's wedding. I began, "Dear Mrs. Whitmore, this is Evelyn Carter, the bride's mother. First, thank you for proudly telling everyone that your family covered all the wedding expenses. That must feel wonderful for you. Attached are all contracts, invoices, and bank payment receipts in case you'd like to refresh your memory. In case it has escaped your attention, every dollar of the $92,000 spent on tonight's wedding was paid by me. Not you, not Andrew, not anyone named Whitmore. If you'd still like to boast about your family's generosity tonight, feel free to do so, with full understanding of the truth. Sincerely, Evelyn Carter." I attached everything: hotel invoices, transfer receipts, contracts bearing my signature, even the PDF bank, statements I downloaded earlier, irrefutable. I didn't send it yet. I scheduled the email to send automatically at 8:30 p.m., just when everyone would be seated, the dinner service underway, and the Whitmores likely bragging loudly. I closed the laptop, then reopened it. There was still one more thing. I found my sister's contact, Linda Carter, the one who stood by me through the hardest years, the one Madeline erased from the guest list without hesitation. I called her. "Sis?" Linda answered after 2 rings. "I've been waiting for your call. How is everything over there?" I paused, then asked, "Are you home?" "Yes, we're all having dinner. We keep wondering how the wedding is going. I didn't want to bother you." I swallowed. "Linda, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to stay calm when you hear what I'm about to say." Her tone changed instantly. "Don't scare me. What happened?" I told her. Every detail. From paying the entire wedding cost, to Madeline cutting the whole family from the list, to the sign with our picture banning us from entering. Linda didn't speak. I heard rushed breathing, a chair scraping back, someone in her house asking, "What's wrong?" and then silence. When I finished, Linda exhaled shakily, so deeply I heard the strain in her ribs. "Sis," she whispered, her voice cracking, "please don't tell me you're still there. I'm at a hotel nearby, but Linda, I didn't call just to vent. I need you to do something." "Anything," she said immediately. "Tell me." "I need you to call every single relative Madeline erased from the list. Tell them the truth. Tell them I paid for everything. Tell them she banned her own parents at the door. Tell them she said our family serves no purpose for her future." Silence. I knew Linda was hold her back fury. "You want them to know?" she finally asked. I I said softly, that when Madeline spins her story later, our family already knows the truth. I'm not asking them to storm the wedding. I just don't want them carrying shame on my behalf anymore. Linda inhaled sharply. All right, I'll do it. I swear by tonight our whole family will know who has heart and who threw it away. Her voice softened. Sis, I'm sorry I'm not there with you right now. I gave a faint, tired smile. You are here, just in a different way. We ended the call. Staring at my phone, I realized I wasn't as alone as I thought. Even if Madeline cut herself off, the people who walked with me through hardship still stood firmly by my side. And tonight, I wouldn't let anyone, not even my daughter, cut that bond again. One last task remained before the moment of reckoning. I opened another file, a draft of my will I had prepared with my attorney in Ohio. I had planned to revise it after the wedding, adding Madeline more clearly as a beneficiary. Now, there was no need. I called my attorney, Mr. Jackson. Evelyn, I thought you'd be at the wedding tonight, he said, surprised. I'm still here, I replied, but something has changed. I need to revise my will immediately, at least the draft and email confirmation before Monday. He shifted into professional tone quickly. All right, tell me what you'd like to update. I spoke firmly. I want Madeline Carter removed from all inheritance. The house, savings, life insurance, my small share in the laundromat, everything. I want it reassigned to Mark and then, if Mark passes before me, transferred to a charity fund supporting older women in hardship. He paused. Are you certain, Evelyn? This is a significant decision. Tonight, I said, I received the clearest answer about what I mean to her. I'm not punishing her, Mr. Jackson. I'm simply placing her where she's chosen to be, outside the center of my life. He exhaled heavily. I'll draft the changes and send them to you for review. Come in Monday for final signatures. Thank you, I said, and please keep this confidential. Of course, he replied. Evelyn, this isn't cruelty. Sometimes protecting yourself is a form of love too, painful as it is. I closed the laptop. The hotel room felt like a temporary fortress, a place where I was gathering the scattered pieces of my dignity and rebuilding them into one final barrier. Mark had watched everything silently. He didn't interrupt, didn't protest. He sat at the edge of the bed, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. Mark, I turned to him, if I go through with this, will you resent me? He looked at me for a long moment. His tired eyes were sincere. I've watched you endure more than any woman I know. If tonight is the night you stand up for yourself, I will stand with you. I hurt for her, but I hurt for you far more. I rested my head on his shoulder. Tonight, Madeline's life will change. And so will ours, Mark murmured. In a way, we'll both be freed. I opened my laptop again, not to send more messages or make more calls. I went into my storage folder and gathered every piece of evidence: contracts, invoices, bank statements, screenshots of messages, the email confirmation with the hotel, the new will draft. I placed them all into one folder named Truth. I copied it onto a small silver USB drive I always kept in my purse, then uploaded a duplicate to a private email account meant only for backups. If one day I was no longer here, there would still be enough truth to silence any lies. When everything was finally in place, I looked at the clock. 7:50 p.m. Surely by now, Madeline was standing in the ceremony hall, her hand in Andrew's, smiling in front of 300 guests, believing tonight was the most perfect night of her life, believing she had completely removed two poor nobodies from the flawless picture she wanted to present. She didn't know, couldn't even imagine, that every light above her, every piece of music playing, every chair she and her groom sat on, all depended on one phone call from the mother whose photo she had just posted at the entrance with a ban. And tonight, I would make her understand something she had never learned in her entire life. No one can build their happiness on humiliating the person who gave birth to them and raised them without paying a price. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Then I opened them again, staring straight at my phone screen, where Mr. Harris's number still sat in my call history. I didn't call right away. I left a pause for myself to confirm one last time that this wasn't from impulse or anger. This was the decision of a woman pushed to her final limits, who had thought, endured, forgiven far too many times, and was now choosing to stand on her own side. When that pause ended, I knew it was time. I tightened my grip on the phone and waited for the perfect moment to destroy the wedding I had spent my entire life paying for, only to receive the rawest betrayal in return. Chelsea sent the update just as the clock struck 8:10. "They're all seated, Mrs. Carter. The appetizers will be brought out in a few minutes." Her voice was small but full of meaning. I understood. This was the exact right moment. I set the phone down for a moment. Mark was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, silently looking down at the dim parking lot. When I walked toward him, he turned, his eyes heavy but steady. "Evelyn, are you sure?" I didn't answer with words. I simply took his hand. That hand had guided me through so many hardships, but tonight it became the support I needed to walk into the most decisive moment of my life as a mother. I pressed the call button. Mr. Harris picked up immediately, as if he had been waiting for every second. "Mrs. Carter?" I drew a deep breath. "It's time." No questions, just one crisp reply. "Yes, ma'am. We'll proceed immediately." I set the phone down. Inside me, a strange emptiness spread. A feeling like closing a door that had been open for decades, a door I had never believed I would have the courage to shut. Only a few minutes later, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Chelsea texted, "The sound is off. Everyone is confused. The bride is looking around, panicking." I closed my eyes, imagining the scene inside the venue. The main hall of the Linden Garden, once glowing with warm golden lights, soft background music, elegant table settings, was now swallowed by sudden silence. More than 300 guests, business people, the Whitmore family's partners, friends, relatives from far away, all lifted their heads, looking around, not understanding what was happening. Some laughed, thinking it was part of a performance. Others whispered, irritation clearly on their faces. Then the second text arrived. "The decorative lights are off. Only the emergency lights are on. People are standing up, chaotic." I opened my eyes. Mark watched me, his face reflecting the dim light from my phone. "It started," I whispered. In my mind, I pictured the bright lights going out row by row. From the ceiling down the sides of the hall, the sparkling strings of lights, the ones Madeline had said must look cinematic, now nothing more than dark pieces of glass. Under the cold white glow of emergency lighting, everyone's panic was more visible. Unease seeped into every whisper. These guests, so used to polished, high-class events, were now looking at each other with confusion and irritation. Chelsea texted, "The staff have stopped service. They're all standing still on command. No appetizers are going out." I pictured the young waitstaff in their neat black and white uniforms, standing frozen like statues. No smiles, no polite bows, no champagne refills. And in a luxury wedding, that alone was a loud signal that something enormous was happening. An older guest likely lost patience, standing up and shouting, "What is going on? Get the manager here immediately!" Chairs scraped, voices rose, heels clicked on tile, a storm of noise swelling in the hall, all surging toward Madeline, my daughter, standing in the center like someone stripped of her crown in front of everyone. Chelsea's fourth text came, "Madeline is standing in the center, pale. She's asking the staff who authorized this. No one is answering." I could imagine her face. The same daughter who once beamed with joy on her college graduation day, who once ran to hug me when she got her first job. Now trembling, eyes wide with terror. She didn't understand. She couldn't understand, because she believed power and wealth were what controlled the world. She forgot one thing. Tonight, every glass, every rose, every strip of silk was paid for with my money. The fifth message arrived, longer. Andrew is yelling at the staff. He says he'll call his lawyer. But Manager Harris just walked in. He showed Andrew the contract and pointed at the name, "Yours." I stared at the screen, unusually calm. Some truths don't require shouting, just a signature. I pictured Andrew grabbing the contract, reading my name on every page, then perhaps looking around, searching for backup from his family. But the truth was too clear, too sharp, leaving no one able to save him from the humiliation spreading across the hall like spilled oil. Then Chelsea sent, "Mrs. Whitmore, she opened your email." I sat upright. My heart beat lightly but steadily, no twisting pain now. Mark leaned toward me, almost holding his breath. Then the final message in that sequence appeared. She's frozen. Her hands are shaking. Her face is white. People beside her are asking what's wrong. She handed her phone to her husband. He looked at it, then looked at Andrew, like he wants to crush him. I exhaled, a long breath I had been holding for weeks. The Whitmore family, who mocked me, looked down on me, orchestrated my humiliation at the gate, lost their dignity in just a few minutes. I didn't feel triumphant. Truly, I didn't feel joy reading those texts. What rose inside me wasn't arrogant victory, but deep relief. Like finally, the truth had been forced to speak after being buried so long. I imagined Margaret Whitmore standing at her table, hands shaking, reading each invoice, each contract I sent. Every paid by Evelyn Carter, cutting into her pride like cold metal. I imagined Andrew turning to the bride, my daughter, just as stunned. His pride ripped away in front of 300 people. And I knew, at that very moment, the Whitmores finally understood something they never expected. The woman they humiliated was the only reason they had the wedding that was now falling apart before their eyes. Then Chelsea texted a sentence that made my hand pause above the screen. Madeline is crying. She's asking, "Who did this?" I stared at the words, my heart tightening. My daughter was crying. That moment didn't make me waver, but it did bring a sharp ache to the part of me that was still a mother. I had given birth to her. I had raised her through the hardest years. And now I was the one pulling the cloth off the truth at the wedding she treated as her life's dream. But I didn't regret it. I had been silent too long. I had let her believe there were no consequences. I had let myself be treated as an extra in the life I built for her. If tonight she had to stand under cold emergency lighting, facing 300 questioning eyes, then that was the only lesson she would listen to. I put the phone down. Mark squeezed my shoulder. "Are you all right?" I nodded, and for the first time my eyes were no longer wet. All right, for the first time. Truly all right. Outside the window, the lights of Ohio shimmered like quiet dots, as if reminding me that life was bigger than the pain Madeline caused. And in that rare moment, I knew the storm I unleashed wasn't to destroy her. It was to let her see what she had lost by letting arrogance lead her. Tonight the lights at the wedding went out, but the light inside me, for the first time in a long while, turned back on. I was sitting at the edge of the bed, my heart settling like calm water after the strongest wind of my life, when my phone vibrated violently. The screen lit up with the caller's name, Madeline. I stared at it for a long time. Mark stood behind me, his eyes gentle but sad, as if he knew exactly what I was about to face. When I pressed answer, I heard my daughter's ragged breaths, the chaotic noise behind her, people shouting, management being called, chairs scraping. Then Madeline burst into tears, sobbing, Mom, please help me." I closed my eyes, not from pain, but because I realized I had been waiting for this call, not out of satisfaction, but out of closure. "Madeline," I said, my voice strangely calm, "there's nothing to save." It was as if she had been struck in the chest. "What do you mean?" A minute ago, everything was normal. Then suddenly, the lights went off, the staff left, the email came. Everyone is looking at me like you lied to them, I said. Like you made up a story about your in-laws' generosity. Like you turned your own mother into a poor maid to be kept outside the gate. Madeline sniffled, her voice shrinking. "Mom, I didn't think it would end up like this. I just wanted everything to look perfect. The Whitmore family, they have very high standards, and I spoke softly, but not gently. You put their standards above your own family, above your parents, above the mother who kept you alive through the hardest years of your life." Silence, only her quiet sobbing. I continued, "Madeline, do you remember you told me to cut all our relatives because they did nothing for your future? You banned us from the ceremony area to preserve the image. You allowed them to hang a sign banning your own parents at the entrance." "No. Mom, you also said," I emphasized, "that you were ashamed people would know your mother once worked at a laundromat. Do you remember that?" Madeline's breath hitched, like she couldn't get air. I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," I said, "and you never apologized." Behind her voice, I heard someone yank the phone. Andrew's voice exploded, angry and arrogant. "What the hell do you think you're doing? You ruined our wedding, you—" "No," I cut in, my voice calm to the point of being cold. "I only turned off the things I paid for, the things your family took credit for without paying a single cent." "You're insane," Andrew yelled. "You'll pay for this. I'll sue you for causing serious damages." I laughed softly, a thin paper-like sound. It silenced him for several seconds. "Sue me?" I asked. "You're going to sue me because I turned off the sound, the lights, and the service at the wedding I paid for." Do you want to review the contract, Andrew? My name is on every line. I paid every invoice. I have the right to stop everything at any moment. And I spoke slowly. I also have audio files of you bragging to your friends that your family paid for everything, that the bride's side is dirt poor. I heard Andrew choke up, then the sound of him muttering a curse. You will pay for this." "No," I said. "My daughter is the one who will pay, not me." Madeline grabbed the phone back, breathing hard like she had been running, her voice shaking violently. "Mom, please stop. I'm begging you." That plea, if it had been 2 weeks earlier, I might have burst into tears. But now I saw one very clear truth. She only begged when she was exposed, not when she did wrong. "Madeline, I said, my voice lowering, almost a whisper. Today, I did not ruin your wedding. You ruined it yourself. You belittled your parents. You deceived your guests. You built your dream on humiliating the people who raised you, and you thought you would never have to pay for it. Mom, please. Don't say that. This, I said, is a lesson about consequences. You can hate me for the rest of your life, but you will never forget tonight. Behind her, I heard hundreds of guests murmuring, people calling for staff, Mrs. Whitmore raising her voice at someone, Andrew slamming his hand on a table. Everything, like the distant echo of a world I had just stepped out of and had no intention of returning to. Madeline sobbed so hard she could barely form words. I need you. Right now, I don't know what to do. You did not need me, I said. When you erased me from your life, when you hung that sign, when you were ashamed of where you came from, so now you must stand on your own feet. Mom, I closed my eyes and said the final sentence I knew would carve itself into this night like a cut. I cannot save someone who does not want to save herself. I lowered the phone from my ear. Mom! Her voice cracked with panic. Don't hang up. I'm begging you. I didn't let her finish. I pressed the end call button. The screen returned to silence. But I didn't stop there. I opened settings and blocked all calls and messages from Madeline, from Andrew, and from the entire Whitmore family. When I set the phone down, I felt Mark place his hand on my back. He didn't say anything. He just squeezed my shoulder. A squeeze strong enough to tell me I wasn't alone. That night, for the first time in many years, I pulled the blanket over myself and laid my head on the pillow without feeling my heart sink. I didn't toss and turn, replaying painful words in my head. I didn't think about the sign at the gate. I didn't think about Madeline's face. I didn't think about the chaos at the party. I only thought one thing. At last, I had stepped out of the cycle of endurance that once felt endless, and I slept. A deep, peaceful sleep, without dreams, without heaviness. The best sleep I had had in many years. 6 months passed since that night the lights went out. A night I still remember in every detail, not because of pain, but because it marked the moment I walked out of a life I had trapped myself in for far too long. Time didn't blur the memory. Instead, it revealed the truth of everything, especially of people. Rumors about the failed wedding spread faster than anything I had ever seen. In the first weeks, a local paper even ran a mocking piece about a luxurious wedding plunged into darkness, though they didn't know half the truth behind it. Guests traded stories in half-whispered loops, and the Whitmore name, once their badge of honor, started being spoken with disdain. In the local business community, their reputation nearly collapsed. The gossip circled around how they borrowed prestige, showed off, and lived off someone else's money. Andrew's mother, Margaret, who once walked into every event with the arrogance of someone who owned the room, now appeared far less often. And when she did, people said she bowed her head more than she lifted it. I didn't feel triumphant hearing any of this. Every downfall has its own cost, and I never wished for others to pay just so I could be happy. But I understood that some lessons in life are only learned through loss. As for Madeline and Andrew, they were still married. The wedding became a joke, but the marriage license was still valid. Yet their lives were nothing like the luxury they once imagined. The Whitmore family cut off all financial support, blaming the wedding scandal for embarrassing them. Andrew lost some key partners. With his reputation stained, he walked into meetings with a much lower posture than before. No one said it outright, but they understood. A man who cannot stand on his own will never earn real respect. Madeline, from what I heard, struggled to keep even a sliver of her image in her husband's family. She had to start working earlier than she planned. She had to track expenses, measure every part of their budget. No more fancy dinners, no more expensive clothing, no more luxury weekend trips, and no more respect from the Whitmores. The same people who once praised her when she first met Andrew now looked at her like an outsider. They saw her as the faint shadow of a mistake. And Madeline tried to hold herself together, but she grew more worn and frail by the day. One early June afternoon, with summer wind blowing across the porch, I was watering my pots of sunflowers when I heard a car stop at the gate. Mark was in his office. Only I stepped out. A worn sedan door opened, and Madeline got out. She had noticeably lost weight. Her once shiny blonde hair was dry and split, tied in a rush. Her clothes were no longer the elaborate style she used to prefer. Her face carried dark circles, her eyes tired as though she had cried through many nights. She stood at the gate, looking at me like someone staring at a stranger she no longer knew how to approach. "Mom," her voice was hoarse, "can you come outside and talk to me for a moment?" I opened the gate but held my distance, not coldly but enough for her to know the past could not be erased like chalk. Madeline burst into tears immediately, as if my presence alone unlocked everything she had held back for months. "Mom, I'm sorry. I can't take it anymore." She fell to her knees right on the gravel path, burying her face in her hands. "I lost everything. Everything. I have no one to talk to. I have no one on my side anymore. Please, Mom, forgive me. I need you." I leaned down and set my hand lightly on her shoulder, but didn't rush to comfort her. "Madeline," I said slowly, "you didn't lose me. You only lost the right to assume I would endure forever." She looked up, her red eyes filled with hope. "Mom, I'll do anything. I just need you to hold me, just once." My heart ached with the instinct of a mother. I had wilted for years out of fear of losing her, but today I understood something else. Love does not mean allowing someone to hurt you endlessly. Sometimes love means standing far enough away for them to see their own mistakes. "Madeline," I said softly, "forgiveness isn't something people receive by asking. Forgiveness is something they earn through action. I'm not closing the door on you, but I won't open it all the way just because of a tearful apology." She went still. In the past, whenever I spoke gently, Madeline often answered with a pout or an irritated tone, but today she only bowed her head. "I understand," she whispered. "I'll come back when I deserve to." She stood, wiped her tears with her sleeve, and as she walked away, her figure shrinking down the familiar road, she looked like a child realizing for the first time that the world did not revolve around her. 1 month after that, Mark and I sold the business. The laundromat that had been our family's livelihood for 30 years had become a symbol of the life I had stepped out of. We sold it to a sweet young couple who promised to keep the shop's name out of respect for the generations who built it. With the money, we moved into a small home near the beaches of North Carolina. The sound of waves every evening made me feel as though I was getting back breaths that life had taken from me for too long. I met with my lawyer again. This time, not in pain or anger, but clarity. The new will was adjusted. All assets would be transferred to a fund supporting older women seeking independence after leaving toxic families. Not a single dollar would go to Madeline, unless she proved through time and consistent action that she had changed. Mr. Jackson nodded after reading it. "Evelyn, This is not the decision of a cold mother. This is the decision of someone who finally knows how to love in the right way. I knew he was right. The most surprising part was what happened after everything fell apart. My family, the same people Madeline erased from her guest list, returned to me more than ever. Linda called me every week. The little nieces and nephews sent hand-drawn letters of the ocean, asking when they could visit. Old friends stopped by, filling the house with laughter. And I realized that the people who truly loved me had never left. I had simply been blinded by the love I poured into a child who didn't value it. One evening, Mark and I sat on the porch, watching the sun sink into the sea, the deep orange fading into soft purple. Mark said, "Do you feel lighter now?" I nodded. Not just lighter, I feel free. For the first time in years. Free from expectations, free from the fear of losing my child, free from feeling I had to be endlessly good just to be loved, free to live the life I spent too many years building for others. And as the ocean breeze brushed past me, I closed my eyes and smiled, not because the past was beautiful, but because I knew I had stepped into the most beautiful part of my own life. From the porch overlooking the sea each evening, I realize life has moments that force us to look deeply at ourselves. I once believed that if I loved my child unconditionally, every wound could be forgiven. But love without respect is just a shackle wrapped in pretty paper. It makes us forget ourselves, shrink ourselves, sacrifice until we break, and still never be enough. I spent too many years living that way. Now, looking back, I understand that leaving someone you love is not always the absence of love. Sometimes it is the only way to save yourself from drowning. It hurts, yes, but not every pain is bad. Some pain opens a door. And for me, that door was the night the wedding lights went out. Since the day Madeline came begging for forgiveness and then quietly left, I haven't received another call or message. But strangely, my heart no longer waits, no longer hopes for an explanation, no longer hopes for anything that might drag me back into the fragile woman I used to be. Some relationships can only heal when both sides try. If only one side looks back, apologizes, or repairs. That is not family. That is a spiral of exhaustion. I do not hate Madeline. Even though I close the door, my heart still hopes that someday, not through tears or apologies, but through long-term change and real actions, she will show me she's grown. But if that day never comes, I will not hurt anymore. I have already saved myself. Now every morning I walk along the beach, picking up a few shells still wet from the tide, listening to the waves like a lullaby from a new life. In the afternoon, I sit at the nearby community center, talking with older women trapped in toxic families, women who were once versions of me. I listen to them cry, then quietly offer them the courage I paid a very high price to find. I realized that the most meaningful thing in my life wasn't paying for a wedding or putting my child through college, but helping other women see their worth. The thing I once desperately wished someone would help me see. Anyone who writes, leaves a message, or asks me to share my story, I read everything. Each note reminds me I am not alone, and none of us ever truly are. Family. I learned this far too late, but just in time, is not necessarily made of blood. Family is the people who stay when you fall. Family is the ones who never make you feel small. Family is the ones who speak your name with kindness, not contempt. And now, as you sit somewhere listening to this story, I want to ask you something sincere. Where are you listening from? And have you ever felt overlooked by your own family or had to stand up to protect your dignity? If you have, I hope you leave a few words in the comments, not for me, but for the other women who read them, the ones still suffering silently so they know they are not alone. Thank you, truly thank you, for being here, for listening to the journey of an ordinary mother like me. Every minute you spend with this story matters to me more than you can imagine. And if you want to continue walking with me with stories about the quiet strength of middle-aged and older women, then please follow the channel and leave a like. It isn't an obligation. It's simply a way of saying you're still here and that stories of healing like this still have a place in your heart. Thank you for staying with me to the end. I wish you peace, and I hope you too will find your own freedom.
The only thing your pension should cover is a nursing home, not keeping this house. My daughter-in-law's cold words rang out before 200 guests. I hadn't even reacted when a glass of red wine was flung straight into my face. My whole body trembled, but inside, a door opened. The door to a truth I had hidden for 20 years. My name is Margaret Sullivan, 70 years old, a widow living on the coast of Clearwater, Florida. For more than 15 years, I had lived quietly in a 2-story wooden house facing the sea. It wasn't just a home. It was the place where my husband Thomas and I had built every brick, every memory. After he died of cancer, I chose to continue a modest life, with my old Ford, clothes from discount shops, and a part-time job at a small bakery nearby. To anyone looking in, I was just an ordinary old woman with a modest pension, and that was exactly what I wanted. But that evening, in the glittering banquet hall of the Marriott Hotel, that mask was ripped away. Not because I wanted it, but because of the cruelty of Vanessa, the woman who had officially become my daughter-in-law less than an hour earlier. The guests froze. Some coughed to cover the awkwardness. Others lowered their eyes to avoid mine. But many pairs of eyes stayed fixed, waiting to see how I, the mother-in-law humiliated in public, would react. I wiped the red wine dripping down my chin, my face burning but my heart hurting 100 times more. I turned to my son, Daniel, hoping against hope he would defend his mother. But no. He just stood there, head bowed to the polished wooden floor, his shoulders shaking like a child caught red-handed, but not saying a single word. That image chilled me to my bones. My son, the boy who once clutched my hand when he learned to walk, now stood silent like an accomplice. Vanessa smiled, her smile sharp as a blade. The white wedding gown, glittering with crystals on her shoulders, reflected the chandelier above, making her mocking words even more piercing. "You should be reasonable. You don't need that much space. Daniel and I need that house to start our new life." I stood frozen, the whole hall spinning. In a flash, memories of the past 2 years flooded back. Vanessa mocking my house as old, belittling my car as unsafe, casually prying into my finances under the guise of concern. Now, all of it was laid bare in front of the guests. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply turned and walked out, each step slow, while whispers rippled behind me. Every step crushed my heart, but at the same time, I felt a new fire rising. That glass of wine hadn't just soaked my dress, it had burned away the last shred of patience I had held on to. In the cold hallway leading to the parking lot, I pulled out my phone, my hands still shaking but my eyes growing clear. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years, the number of Mr. Perry, the lawyer who had been with my family for over 30 years. He was the one who knew every secret Thomas and I had kept. "Perry, it's Margaret. I need you at the Marriott Hotel right now. Bring all the documents we prepared. Yes, that file. The time has come." There was silence on the line for a few seconds, then his voice dropped low. "Are you sure, Margaret? Once you go public, there's no turning back." "I've never been more sure," I replied, my voice firm, so steady it surprised even me. I sat in my old Ford, the faded leather scent lingering. The streetlight cast my reflection in the rearview mirror, highlighting the wrinkles of age and the red wine stains still blotched on my skin. But in my eyes, there was no more submission. I thought of Thomas. He had always said, "Margaret, money is only a tool. Never let it control you. But if the day comes when it must be used to defend your dignity, don't hesitate." I had avoided that day, hoping my son would grow wise and cherish his mother as before. But tonight, I understood. My silence had been taken as weakness, and I would not let them take another thing from me, not my house, not my dignity. Outside, the distant sound of waves blended with the cool night breeze. I closed my eyes, replaying the wedding scene. The glass of wine, Vanessa's cruel laugh, Daniel's lowered gaze, and the hundreds of witnesses who said nothing. In that loneliness, I realized one truth. When the world turns its back on you, sometimes that is the very moment you must return to your own inner strength. And that strength, I knew, was in the files Perry was about to bring. In half an hour, when he walked into the parking lot with that briefcase, my life and Daniel and Vanessa's lives would never be the same again. I turned on the radio, an old jazz tune filling the car, reminding me of the nights Thomas and I danced in the living room. I smiled faintly, a mix of bitterness and resolve. They thought I was just a poor old woman living on a pension. They had no idea I was the one holding everything. Leaning back, I whispered, "Vanessa, you've just made the biggest mistake of your life. You'll soon learn what it means to pay for arrogance." In that moment, I saw the future open before me, not one of endurance, but of confrontation. And this time, I would hold the board. As I waited for Perry, memories pulled me back 2 years, to the day Daniel introduced Vanessa. I remembered that afternoon so clearly, the Florida sun shining on the porch, Thomas's chair still in place, and the simple dinner I prepared: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and the apple pie Daniel had loved since childhood. I wanted their first meal in my home to be warm and welcoming, but the moment Vanessa stepped inside, I sensed something wrong. She glanced around the living room, her eyes betraying disdain. The reupholstered floral sofa, the scratched coffee table Thomas had repaired over and over in Vanessa's eyes. They were outdated, shameful. "Oh, this place. Cozy," she said with a thin smile, her tone like a needle piercing my chest. Daniel, too busy dragging a suitcase, didn't notice the sarcasm. He beamed. "Mom, this is Vanessa. I really hope you two get along." I reached out my hand, forcing a smile. Vanessa's hand was cold, her shake limp, and within seconds she pulled away to adjust her sparkling necklace. I knew right then she was the kind of woman used to glittering lights, not the salty simplicity of my seaside home. Dinner was far from warm. Vanessa picked at her chicken, barely ate, and drank water repeatedly. When I asked about her family, she brushed it off. "My parents run businesses. Nothing special." But when the subject shifted to money, her eyes lit up, curiosity sharp enough to chill me. "How do you manage on just a pension? It must be hard living alone like this, right?" The question cut like a knife. I forced a smile and answered simply, "I get by. It's enough." That night, after cleaning up, I sat by the window staring at the sea, unease rising in me. Not just because of Vanessa's tactless words, but because of Daniel's silence, like he was mesmerized by her presence. My once attentive, sensitive son now felt like a stranger. In the months that followed, every visit brought more jabs. When she saw me in my old floral dress, she chuckled. "Don't you have anything more modern? People these days dress younger." Or when I drove them to the grocery store in my Ford, she sneered. "Is this car even safe anymore? Shouldn't you upgrade?" Daniel didn't defend me, he echoed her. "Mom, maybe she's right. At your age, safety matters more." His words pierced deeper than hers. He no longer knew the difference between genuine concern and disguised insult. Once, when I mentioned my part-time job at the bakery, Vanessa sighed. "At your age, you should be resting. Why are you still working?" Strange. That sentence lodged in my mind. They wanted me to believe I was useless, that I should give up everything, my house, my assets, my right to decide, and let them take over. I chose to stay quiet. I told myself maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe Vanessa was just clumsy with her words. But as time went on, I realized those remarks weren't accidental. They were tiny knives, one cut at a time, aimed at my self-respect. A year passed, and Daniel depended on Vanessa more and more. He started cutting me off at meals, started giving me that annoyed look whenever I offered an opinion. Worst of all, he gradually looked down on the house he grew up in, the home Thomas and I devoted our lives to keeping. I remember one evening on the porch, the two of them sitting together. Vanessa held a real estate magazine, pointed at luxury oceanfront condos, and said, "Daniel, see? These places are so much more modern than your mom's old house." Daniel nodded without pushing back. I looked at my son, hoping for even a small reaction to defend his mother, but all I saw was quiet agreement. In that moment, I knew the roots of the conflict had sunk deeper than I'd imagined. I still remember what Thomas told me before he passed. Never underestimate greed. It can turn family into strangers. Back then, I thought he was too pessimistic. But now, seeing the way Vanessa looked at my house with the eyes of an appraiser, I understood how right Thomas had been. That night, after they left, I walked through each room, touching the family photos on the walls, the old piano where Daniel played his first song. I whispered, "This house will never belong to someone who only sees dollar signs." A resolve rose in me, even though I didn't yet know how I would act on it. But I knew the conflict between me and Vanessa wasn't just words. It was a drawn-out, covert battle, and Daniel, my only child, was taking the other side. One summer evening, I got a call from Daniel. "Mom, we want to stop by this weekend. There's something important to discuss." My son's voice sounded unfamiliar, no longer warm like before. A small wave of dread passed through me. My gut told me this wouldn't be a normal visit. That day, I baked waffles and brewed tea, trying to keep a family feel. But instead of just Daniel and Vanessa, they arrived with her parents. I was surprised, but I still smiled and invited them in. I hadn't even finished setting the table when Vanessa started. "We want to talk seriously about your future and ours." The way she said "we" instead of "I" chilled me. This wasn't a family visit. It felt like a strategy meeting, and I was the problem to be handled. Vanessa's mother, Louise, glanced around the living room and sighed. "Miss Margaret, at your age, living alone in such a big house is too much. You should consider a safer option." Vanessa's father, Richard, jumped in. "We know the manager of an excellent assisted living facility, medical care, meals, community activities. Much more suitable for you." I sat in silence, listening to them go on and on, my eyes fixed on Daniel. My son sat beside his wife, nodding along with every line like an obedient puppet. Vanessa folded her hands, her voice sweet but razor sharp. "We're about to get married and we want kids. Your house is really too big and empty for one person. If you move into assisted living, it's safer for you and helps us have a place to start." Her words sounded reasonable, but each one hit my ears like a rock. This house is where Thomas and I built a life. It holds our entire history. And here they were, discussing it like an item to be transferred. I set my teacup down and kept calm. I can still take care of myself, and I have no plans to leave this house. The room tightened like a stretched wire. Louise raised an eyebrow, her tone half pity, half threat. "You need to be realistic. One fall in the bathroom can be dangerous. If you refuse to change, it'll be trouble for everyone." Richard pulled a packet of papers from his pocket and placed it in front of me. "These are average costs for assisted living. With the money from selling your house, you could cover it for decades and still have some left to help Daniel and Vanessa start their life. I looked at the packet, my heart pounding. No doubt about it. This was a planned ambush. They came armed with arguments, evidence, even calculations. Daniel finally spoke, his voice shaky, like he'd memorized the lines. "Mom, I know this is hard, but think of us. Vanessa and I have sacrificed so much for this wedding. All we need is a little help from you." I looked at my son and saw a stranger. Gone was the child who clung to me when he was scared of the dark. Gone was the young man who promised to protect his mother after his father died. In front of me was a man putting his wife and in-laws above his own mother. I gave a small, dry laugh and lowered my voice. "Help? Or take?" The table went dead silent. Vanessa bit her lip, then snapped. "Miss Margaret, don't be negative. This is best for everyone. If you insist, we'll have to find another way." Her eyes flashed cold. I understood exactly what another way meant. That wasn't a suggestion. It was a threat. I barely slept that night. I walked through the house, room by room, touching my wedding photo with Thomas, the old piano, the scratches on the floor from when Daniel used to drag chairs as a kid. Everything seemed to whisper, "Don't let anyone take us." The next morning, I took out a small voice recorder. From that day on, whenever Vanessa and Daniel came over, I slipped it in my pocket or set it on the kitchen shelf. I recorded every word, every threat, every time they discussed moving Mom out. I knew that if I was going to fight them, I needed proof. Another evening, Vanessa strode straight into the kitchen and tossed a few assisted living brochures on the table. "Take a look, Mom. You'll have friends, activities. It's much more fun than being alone here." I nodded politely, but inside, my anger burned. I kept those brochures not to consider them, but to add to the evidence of their plan to push me out of my own home. Vanessa grew bolder by the day. She called nonstop, texted to pressure me. Daniel gradually spoke in the same voice. "Mom, Vanessa just cares about you. If you love me, help us get settled." I listened, my heart tightening. Love? What kind of love forces a mother to abandon her memories and her home? That's not love, it's exploitation dressed up as filial piety. I understood they were past snide comments. Now they had a plan, backed by Vanessa's family, and if I didn't prepare, one day they'd really force me out with legal tricks. That night, with the ocean thudding outside my window, I made myself a promise. If they want a war, I'll fight. I won't let my home become their trophy. I once thought I could endure the snide remarks, ignore the side glances, and everything would pass. But after that calculated family meeting, I knew there was no turning back. Vanessa and her family had no intention of appealing to love. They had a plan and were ready to force me out, and if I wavered, it would all be over. I went to my bedroom and opened the wooden wardrobe Thomas had built by hand more than 30 years ago. In the deepest corner, under layers of cloth, was a black metal box. I still wore the small key on a chain around my neck. Inside were documents Thomas and I had kept for years, known to no one, not even Daniel. Sitting on the bed, I opened each folder. The warm glow of the old bedside lamp lit every line and number I'd read hundreds of times, but never without amazement. In front of me wasn't the estate of a middle-class family like people assumed. It was a substantial fortune, the result of Thomas's patient, careful investing. Thomas wasn't just an office worker like everyone believed. He'd been a founding shareholder in an import company, then moved into real estate. When Daniel was little, Thomas and I agreed. Live modestly, hide the truth about our wealth. He told me, "Flaunted wealth brings trouble, Margaret. Quiet wealth truly protects the family." I agreed, and for years we kept a simple front. I worked part-time and drove a plain car. This wooden seaside house, to others just a beach place, was our fortress for keeping secrets. The papers in my hands that night said it all. An office building for rent in downtown Tampa. a luxury condo for short-term rentals, stocks in both our names, and long-term investments worth several $1,000,000. There was also a vacation home in Georgia where Thomas and I had dreamed of retiring. I slowly turned to the last folder, the agreement with Perry, who had managed the investments since Thomas died. Perry knew everything, but respected my wish to keep it private. I'd told him, only reveal this if it ever truly becomes necessary. That night, alone in my familiar room, I felt pain mixed with strength. I hurt because Daniel didn't know what I'd done for him. While I guarded our estate and quietly covered his small debts during his early working years, he stood by as his wife and in-laws tried to push his mother out of her home. But I also realized I wasn't powerless. I had tools to fight back, and this time I wouldn't miss my chance. The next day I called Perry. We met at a small cafe where he liked to read the paper. When I walked in, he stood to greet me, concern in his eyes. I set the files on the table and said firmly, "It's time to use what Thomas left." Perry sighed, took a sip of coffee and said, "I figured this day would come. Miss Margaret, are you ready? Once the truth is out, your family will never be the same. I have no other choice. They want to turn me into someone incompetent just to steal this house. If I keep staying silent, they'll think I'm truly helpless." We discussed things for nearly 2 hours. Perry would prepare the legal documents, suspend all financial support for Daniel, update the will to move most of the assets into a charitable trust, and have a lawsuit ready if they continued to threaten me. When I left the cafe, I walked slowly, but my heart pounded. All these years, I had kept this secret to protect Daniel, hoping he would live decently by his own efforts. I never imagined a day would come when I'd have to use that very truth against my own son. That night, sitting on the front porch, I watched the waves hit the shore under the moonlight. Each wave reminded me that some things can't be stopped: greed, betrayal, but I could choose how to face them. I told myself, "Thomas, if you were here, you'd do the same." A week later, Daniel and Vanessa came again. As soon as she stepped in, Vanessa threw a stack of documents onto the kitchen table. "Mom, we picked out an assisted living place. It's excellent. You just need to sign off on selling the house, and everything will be taken care of." I looked at the papers without touching them. Calmly, I replied, "I'm not signing anything. And I suggest you both stop before it's too late." Vanessa laughed, a smile sharp as a knife. "You think you have a choice? If we have to, we'll prove you're no longer lucid enough to make decisions." I looked straight into her eyes, for the first time without avoiding them. "Then get ready, because I'm ready too." In that moment, Vanessa hesitated. Maybe she realized my eyes no longer held the usual patience. I said nothing more. I knew the real battle had begun, and I held a weapon they'd never imagined. That night, I opened the metal box again and laid each document neatly on the desk. The warm lamplight fell across the cold but powerful numbers: several $1,000,000 in accounts, property lease contracts, valuable stocks. I whispered, "This isn't just money. It's proof I am not weak. This will be the shield that protects my dignity." After that tense confrontation, I understood I couldn't just play defense. To fight Vanessa and her entire family, I needed to know their reality, how much debt, what they lived on, and why they were so determined to get this house. Only by knowing the truth could I prepare a counterstrike. I thought of Linda, my college friend, now a financial consultant at a major firm in Tampa. Linda is sharp, direct, and absolutely discreet. We hadn't seen each other in years, but our friendship never faded. I called her, my voice soft but resolute. "Linda, I need your help. This is life and death for me. Just tell me." "I'm here for you, Margaret." I met Linda at a small cafe on the corner of the old downtown. When she saw me, she hugged me tight, then studied my tired face. I told her everything: the family meeting, the threats, the plan to send me to assisted living. Linda listened, her eyes darkening. I'll check. I have a way to see Daniel and Vanessa's credit situation and financial records. But Margaret, are you sure? The truth can be brutal. I need it, Linda. I have to know what they're plotting. 3 days later, Linda called. Urgency in her voice. Margaret, we need to meet in person. I found things you wouldn't believe. I drove my old Ford to her office. Linda had a thick red folder ready on the table. She slid it to me, her tone dropping low. Brace yourself. I opened the file. Each page felt like a knife to the chest. Daniel and Vanessa were drowning in debt. First, the credit cards, 5 different cards, with a total balance of over $80,000. My hands shook as I read line after line. Luxury fashion stores, high-end restaurants, a trip to Cancun, extravagant gifts. Nothing essential, just indulgence. Next were the car loans. 2 new Mercedes, with monthly payments of nearly $1,200 each. Daniel's salary, only $45,000 a year, clearly couldn't cover it. Their downtown Tampa apartment was also 3 months past due. Eviction loomed. I turned to the last section. Linda had marked it in red. Total debt, more than $150,000, not counting the wedding loan. I let go, the folder slipping onto the table as my vision blurred. My heart clenched not at the numbers but at my son, the boy I raised with sweat and tears, letting his life sink this far. Linda gently placed a hand on my shoulder. Margaret, they're playing a desperate game. And the trump card is your house. If they get it, they'll sell it immediately to pay off the debt. There's no future or family happiness here. Just desperation and greed. I sat in silence, my head spinning. My heart tore in two, pity for my son and a deep, aching anger. Daniel should have honored the value of hard work, but instead of learning, he let Vanessa drag him into a pit of debt. That night, I went home and sat in a dark living room, the only sound the ocean outside the window. I spread the papers across the table and stared at the cold numbers. They read like a verdict. I saw Daniel as a little boy running in the yard, laughing with bright, hopeful eyes. Now, in these pages, he existed only as a desperate debtor. I picked up a pen and wrote a few lines in the journal Thomas left me. Our son has lost his way. He thinks he can take his mother's house to save his life. But he doesn't know that inside this house, I've kept the faith and the strength to fight back. The next day, I met with Perry. I set the file on his desk and told him what Linda had found. He nodded, thoughtful. I suspected as much. Now we have evidence. If they dare sue, we'll use these debts to show the real motive: greed and exploitation. Perry advised me not to act rashly. He'd prepare the legal filings, and I would keep pretending I knew nothing, letting Vanessa and Daniel expose more of their plan. I agreed. Walking out of his office, I felt both heavy and relieved. Heavy because my son had sunk so far, relieved because I was finally no longer in the dark. In the days that followed, I watched closely. Every time they visited, I noticed the details. Vanessa's brand new designer heels, the gleam of Daniel's watch. I no longer saw a mere showing off. I saw the signs of desperation dressed up. One evening, when Daniel stepped outside to take a call, I overheard Vanessa whispering in the kitchen to her mother on the phone. Once we get the house, we'll pay everything off and buy a new condo. She's weak, she'll give in soon. I turned away, my heart like ice. But this time, instead of shaking, I felt a sharp clarity flood my veins. I knew I was no longer just a victim. I was becoming the main player in the game they thought I'd abandoned. That night, I opened the file again, took out paper and pen, and wrote a simple plan. Recordings keep evidence, prepare to go public. I wrote it clearly, each word like a nail. I also began calling a few old friends who had worked with Thomas. They knew how he invested, and they were willing to testify if needed. I gathered each piece, building the larger picture. Before, I only saw Vanessa as cruel and Daniel as weak. But now I saw more clearly. Both were trapped in their own debt snare. And instead of choosing decency to climb out, they chose to sacrifice the mother. I closed the file and exhaled. Night draped over the house, but inside me, a light had begun to glow. I held the truth in my hands, and when the time came, that truth would cut through every illusion they'd built. That afternoon, the wind off Tampa Bay blew harder than usual. The sky was heavy with gray clouds, and waves pounded the rocks behind the house like drums warning of trouble. I sat in the living room with a cup of chamomile tea gone cold, eyes on the window. Deep down, I sensed a real storm not offshore, but in this family was about to hit. Right on cue, there was a knock. Vanessa came in, not bothering to hide her usual arrogance. A tight red dress, high heels clicking on the polished wood floor. Daniel followed, tense, still letting his wife lead. Vanessa didn't sit. She stood in the center of the room as if to claim it all. "Margaret, I'm not here to beat around the bush. Our wedding is in 1 week. Daniel and I have decided this house is the best wedding gift you can give." I set my cup down and looked calmly into her ambition-bright eyes. "A wedding gift? Vanessa, do you understand what this house means to me? It's not a trinket for a party." She laughed, a shrill sound slicing through the room. "Meaning? For a woman pushing 70, does meaning matter more than reality? You can't manage a house this big. Better let us use it. It's not like you need much anymore." Daniel shifted, as if wanting to speak, then stayed silent when Vanessa gripped his hand. I saw a flicker of concern in my son's eyes, weak as a candle about to go out. I stayed still, not angry like before. My calm made Vanessa bristle. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a threat. "If you keep clinging to this house, don't blame us for finding another way. You know, at your age, a few doctor's notes are enough for a judge to say you can't make decisions. Then you'll lose everything." Each word pierced like a cold needle. But instead of trembling, I smiled not with joy, but with bitter resolve. "You've got your script ready, don't you, Vanessa? But you forgot one thing. I'm not that easy to handle." I stood and looked straight at Daniel. "Son, do you really agree with what your wife just said? Do you see your mother as a burden, someone to use and discard?" Daniel kept his head down and said nothing. That silence hurt more than any accusation. I sighed and turned away, not wanting them to see my eyes welling up. Vanessa took Daniel's silence as a victory. She sneered. "Good, then we're in agreement. After the wedding, you'll sign the transfer papers and we'll handle everything. In return, you can live somewhere smaller and quieter. Everybody wins." She spun on her heel, her stiletto clicks cracking through the empty room. Daniel followed, but before stepping out, he glanced back at me, his eyes lost, as if begging for help, yet no words came. The door closed, leaving a heavy silence behind. I dropped into a chair, my hands trembling. Not from fear, but from a surge of pain. I had waited for Daniel to take my side, just once, and once again my son chose silence. Night fell, and the sky grew darker. Distant thunder rolled in, warning that a real storm was coming in from the bay. I walked slowly to my bedroom and opened the old safe in the closet, the one I hadn't touched since Thomas died. My hand brushed the cold metal, my heart equal parts anxious and resolved. The key turned once, and the safe door clicked open with a heavy sound. Inside, along with a few yellowed photo albums, was a brown leather folder Thomas had told me about before he passed. "If you ever feel cornered, open it. Everything you need to protect yourself is in here." I pulled the folder out and set it on the table. The leather was worn but still sturdy. I opened it to neat pages: property deeds, stock certificates, savings accounts, investment contracts. The total value far exceeded anything Daniel and Vanessa could imagine. I read each page carefully and felt how clearly Thomas had anticipated the future. He knew this world wasn't short on people willing to use tricks to take what isn't theirs, even family. and he had left me the tools to fight back. There were handwritten letters, too, his familiar slanted script. Margaret, never think living modestly is weakness. It's your greatest strength. But when you must, use the truth to protect yourself. These assets aren't just money. They're the belief that you deserve to live with freedom and respect. By then, tears were sliding down my face. I traced his handwriting, as if his warmth were still there. A new strength rose in me, not from anger, but from love and fairness. I organized the documents and tucked them into a small leather bag. Then I wrote a few lines in my notebook. Tomorrow the storm will come. I'm ready. If they want to turn a wedding day into a day of theft, then that very day will be the day they learn about consequences. They think I'm weak, but they don't know I am Margaret, the woman who never bows. Outside, rain began to patter on the roof tiles. I closed the notebook and sat by the window, watching a black sky split by lightning. The storm was truly coming out there and inside my own family. But this time, I wasn't the one trembling and waiting. I was the one prepared to face it. Daniel and Vanessa's wedding day arrived in the sticky heat of early Florida summer. I wore a simple navy dress, Thomas once said, fits your eyes best. My makeup was light, nothing fancy, but in the mirror I saw a different woman, calm, with fire in her eyes. The luxury hotel hosting the reception blazed with lights. More than 100 guests milled about. The laughter and clinking glasses created a glamorous buzz. But when I stepped into the ballroom, a ripple of silence passed through. I knew many still remembered Vanessa's insinuations. Daniel's mom is old and forgetful, can't manage anything. Those rumors had spread faster than I expected. I chose a table near the back. No one greeted me. No one dared come over. I quietly watched my son in a tailored tuxedo and Vanessa, radiant in a flowing white gown. They looked like the perfect couple to bring everyone else, but I knew the truth. When the vows ended and confetti popped, Vanessa glanced at me, a spark of challenge in her eyes. I gave a small smile only she would understand. I could feel it. The moment to flip the board had come. As the first dance began, I stood. My heels clicked on the wood floor, drawing a few looks. I didn't need a microphone, but I walked to the DJ table and took one with a calm that felt almost cold. "Sorry for the interruption," I said clearly. "I'm Margaret Wallace, the groom's mother." The noise dropped. Curious eyes turned toward me. Vanessa frowned, and Daniel looked rattled. I took a deep breath and pulled from my purse the file I'd carefully prepared the night before. Tonight we celebrate a marriage, but it's also the night I must speak the truth. For months I've been called old, useless, even threatened with losing control of my own assets. I stayed silent, hoping my son would understand. But my silence was taken as weakness. Whispers spread across the room. I opened the folder and kept my voice steady. These papers prove I'm neither helpless nor broke, as some have claimed. I own an office building in Tampa, a short-term rental condo, stocks, and other assets. All legal, all transparent. I held some pages up. A few guests exchanged stunned looks. Vanessa went pale and hurried toward me, hissing through her teeth, "What are you doing, you crazy old woman?" I turned the mic toward her so everyone could hear. "What I should have done from the beginning. Your pension should only pay for a nursing home, not for keeping this house." Your words, Vanessa. The room erupted in murmurs. Some guests raised their phones to record. Vanessa lost her composure. The makeup on her carefully painted face couldn't hide her panic. Before I could react, a glass of red wine was thrown straight into my face. The hot liquid ran down my collar and soaked my dress. The whole room froze. I heard someone whisper, "My God, what did they just do to the groom's mother?" Vanessa seemed to snap, while Daniel stepped forward, his voice breaking. "Mom, why are you saying this only now?" I took a handkerchief from my purse, slowly wiped the wine away, and looked straight into my son's shame-filled eyes. But all I felt was sadness. Because I hoped you'd see me with love, not calculation. But you let your wife and her family pull your strings. The air was tight as a drawn wire. I set the folder on a nearby table and pulled out a few pages bank transfers. Over the past 3 years, I quietly paid more than $120,000 of debt for Daniel and Vanessa rent, credit cards, even tonight's wedding costs my money. And what did I get in return? A plan to force me out of my house and even build a case that I'm incompetent. A wave of shock rolled through the room. An older guest shook his head and muttered to the person beside him. Someone blurted out, "Shameful." Vanessa shrieked, her voice harsh, "Don't listen to her. She's making this up to ruin my wedding." I stayed calm and handed the mic to a man behind me, Joseph, my trusted neighbor whom I'd asked to attend. He stepped up, holding his phone. "I have the video. I personally saw Vanessa bring a real estate agent to measure Miss Margaret's house, without telling her. On his screen, the footage was clear, Vanessa in my yard, talking to a man with a measuring pad. The whispers swelled again, this time charged with anger. Vanessa stumbled, nearly falling, and Daniel went stone still. I took back the mic, my voice low but firm. I had no intention of wrecking my son's happiness, but if that happiness is built on lies and greed, it was rotten from the start. And tonight, you have all seen it. For a moment, the ballroom froze, then chairs scraped, and guests began to leave. Some shook their heads, others looked at Daniel with pity. My son, dressed to perfection, collapsed into a chair like he'd lost everything. Vanessa sobbed, her expensive makeup smeared. I folded the documents, slipped them into my purse, and turned for the door. No one stopped me. No one dared whisper behind my back. Each step I took sounded like stamping the end of a hollow, gaudy play. Outside, a hot wind blew, scattering leftover ribbons. I took a deep breath. The heavy night air felt easier somehow. I knew the battle wasn't over. But in that moment, I had reclaimed the most precious thing, my dignity and my voice. The ballroom fell into chaos the moment I left the mic. Chairs scraped, whispers mixed with harsh comments. Some guests kept recording, others shook their heads and left their tables. I stood tall, gripping my file, and without shouting, every word I'd said sliced through the mask Daniel and Vanessa had worked so hard to build. Vanessa stood in the middle of the room, white as a sheet, her expensive makeup streaking with sweat and tears. She screamed, trying to salvage the moment. "Don't believe her. This is just a performance to destroy my happy day." But her voice shook out of control. Guests looked at each other. No one stepped up to defend her. Daniel looked drained, gripping a chair, eyes locked on the documents I'd held up. I had never seen my son so weak or so unfamiliar. A middle-aged guest, likely one of Daniel's business contacts, stood and spoke sternly. "Daniel, did you really let your mother cover all the expenses? So all that bragging, was it her money?" The question hit Daniel like a slap. He didn't answer, just bowed his head, lips trembling. Vanessa rushed in, and the more she spoke, the more shameless she sounded. "We didn't force her. She did it on her own because she loves her son, and now she's lying to humiliate me. How disgraceful." I stepped closer, my voice calm but clear. "If it was voluntary, why did you hire a lawyer to prepare papers to put me in a nursing home? If I'm so weak, why discuss declaring me incompetent to seize my house?" The whole hall fell silent. I saw a few people raise their phones. I knew these clips would be online within hours. Vanessa's mouth hung open, but she couldn't argue back. Then, suddenly, a clap came from the back of the room. Joseph, my close neighbor whom I'd asked to testify, stood up, phone in hand. I saw with my own eyes Vanessa bringing a broker to measure Miss Margaret's house. Here's the recording. If needed, I'll submit it to the court. He cast the video onto the nearby screen. The image was clear. Vanessa on my porch, pointing out corners to a strange man. The crowd buzzed. Someone even let out a mocking whistle. Daniel held his head and slumped into a chair. I heard someone whisper loud enough to make out every word. A lifetime raising a child, only to be betrayed like this. I took a deep breath and spoke firmly. I'm cutting all financial support from this moment on. Every transfer, every guarantee, and every lease in my name is terminated. From today, Daniel and Vanessa will have to live on their own. That declaration fell like the final blow. Vanessa burst into tears and lunged for Daniel's arm. "Say something, get up and defend your wife!" But Daniel stayed put, eyes bloodshot, lips moving without words. Maybe he'd just realized the lavish life of the past few years was a sandcastle I built for him, and I had just knocked it down. I gathered the documents and turned to leave. Right then, the hotel manager, Mr. Martinez, stepped onto the stage, his voice firm. "Please be advised, the guarantee for tonight's event has been canceled. Without an alternative form of payment, we will have to stop service immediately." The noise exploded at once. Many guests stood up, afraid to get dragged into trouble. A few servers started clearing tables. Before the courses were finished, Vanessa screamed, grabbing at the manager. "No way, this is my wedding day, you can't do this." "Mr." Martinez's expression didn't change. "Ma'am, the contract is very clear. Miss Margaret is the guarantor. Now that she's canceled, we have no grounds to continue." I stood below the stage, watching the chaos with a mix of bitterness and relief. Bitter that my son had let his big day turn into a joke. Relieved because at last I had stopped being their umbrella. A few guests came to shake my hand and whisper, "You did the right thing. You're very brave." I nodded, thanked them, and walked toward the exit. Behind me, Vanessa's shrill voice still echoed, "You'll regret this. The whole world will think you're a monster who abandoned her own son." I paused, turned back, and met her eyes. "No, Vanessa, the world will see a woman who stood up when she was betrayed. And the lesson today, you and Daniel will pay for it." I left the ballroom and stepped into the hotel courtyard, where warm yellow lights glowed. The night breeze was cool on my shoulders. Above, the black clouds had cleared, revealing a cold, bright moon. I looked up, my heart heavy but proud. Because I knew this shocking reversal didn't just end that hollow pageant, it opened a new chapter, one where I would no longer stay silent. After that chaotic wedding night, my little house by the sea became a peaceful refuge. The waves still rolled in, the wind still moved through the palms, but inside I knew the real storm wasn't over. With their personalities and ambition, Daniel and Vanessa wouldn't give up easily. Only 3 days later, my doorbell rang hard and fast. When I opened it, a uniformed courier stood there with a thick envelope stamped by the court. My chest tightened. I signed for it, brought it to the kitchen, and set it on the old wooden table. The words were clear. Preliminary summons, petition 2. Evaluate the civil capacity of Miss Margaret Wallace. I dropped into a chair and took a long breath. This was the Plan B Vanessa had threatened. When they couldn't force me to sign the house over, they chose something crueler. Prove I was incompetent to legally seize control. The paperwork included a few statements. I read them, half angry, half amused. Some wedding guests had signed that I acted erratically, disrupted the ceremony, showed signs of financial delusion. They claimed I shouted in the hall, that I declared ridiculous numbers. There were even signatures from 2 neighbors I barely knew, saying I'd been muttering on the porch and seemed forgetful. I held the packet, my hands shaking not from fear, but from fury. How horrifying that people who share your blood would stage a script to steal a lifetime of work from their own mother. That night, I called Perry. After listening, his voice dropped. I figured they'd go this route, but don't worry, we have evidence. But Perry, I said, they got people to sign. On paper, I look like a senile old woman. That's just surface. We'll flip it. I'll arrange for a top psychiatrist to evaluate you formally, and that report will be our strongest shield." I sat quietly for a moment, listening to the ocean outside. Perry was right. I couldn't let them turn truth into lies with a stack of phony statements. The next day, Joseph stopped by. He brought his phone and showed me, "Margaret, you need to see this. The wedding video is everywhere. People are on your side. They're calling you brave for exposing the lies right in the middle of the party." The screen filled with comments. "Strongest woman I've ever seen. This isn't senility. This is clarity." My eyes stung as I read them. Public opinion can change in a heartbeat, but in that moment, those words gave me strength. Still, I knew Daniel and Vanessa wouldn't leave it there. And I was right. 3 days later, Vanessa showed up with an older couple, her parents. They stood in my front yard, their faces smug. Vanessa spoke first, her voice icy. "Miss Margaret, we're here to inform you. Our attorney has filed. In a few weeks, the court will decide. You'll no longer have control over any assets." I folded my arms and answered simply, "Go ahead and try. I have an attorney, too." Her father jumped in, condescending. "You should just cooperate. Courts tend to believe a group of statements. The more you resist, the more dignity you'll lose." I looked them straight in the eye and didn't lower my voice. "My dignity isn't yours to take, and those false statements will turn back on you." They left in a huff, but I knew the next blow would come soon. As expected, the following week my phone lit up with calls from unknown numbers, mostly reporters. News of a case about a son and daughter-in-law seeking guardianship over an elderly mother started leaking to the press. Some headlines were deliberately vague. 68-year-old mother delusional about million-dollar assets? The words made my heart ache, but I refused to break. I met Perry at his office. On the walnut table, he'd already laid out papers. "This is Dr. Simmons's medical report. You're fully competent, no cognitive decline. We'll submit it directly to the court." I held the report, eyes watery. The printed conclusion was clear. Patient Margaret Wallace, 68 years old, possesses full cognitive and decision-making capacity. "No signs of dementia," Perry continued. "We also have video evidence of Vanessa's actions. With public sentiment leaning your way, I believe they'll pay for this reckless move." I nodded, though my heart was still heavy. Even so, a flame in me burned brighter. I remembered Thomas's words. "When needed, use the truth to protect yourself." Yes, the truth was the only weapon I needed. That night, I sat on the porch under the moonlight over the water. I thought of Daniel. A small, fragile hope still flickered that he'd wake up and see he'd gone too far. But the memory of his bowed head at the wedding washed that hope away like sand through my fingers. Softly, I said to myself, "If this is your plan B, then be ready for my counterattack." Out there, the waves kept pounding strong and steady. Just like my resolve, I would not be swept away. The first court date arrived faster than I expected. That morning, I wore something simple, a white blouse, dark slacks, black shoes I'd had for years. I wanted people to see me as I am, an ordinary, clear-minded woman, not the senile old lady Daniel and Vanessa tried to paint. Perry picked me up early. He stepped out of the car, calm expression, eyes full of determination. "Miss Margaret, today matters, but I know you're ready." I nodded, gripping the case file with everything in it. "I've been waiting for this day, Perry, not for revenge, but to prove the truth." The county courthouse gleamed in the Florida Sunday. The steps to the main doors felt taller than usual, but I climbed them steady and sure. In the hallway, I spotted Daniel and Vanessa with their attorney. Vanessa wore an expensive business dress, hair pinned up, face set in a mask of confidence. Daniel looked exhausted, eyes avoiding mine. When our eyes finally met, I saw something in him, part dim regret, part stubborn defiance. The hearing began. The room was packed, not just parties involved, but some reporters too. The last few weeks had turned this into a hot story. I sat at the respondents' table beside Perry. Across from us were Daniel and Vanessa. Their attorney started first, smooth and polished. "Your Honor, we filed this petition out of concern for Miss Wallace's mental health and decision-making capacity. Her recent behavior disrupting a wedding, making unfounded financial claims, suggests she's no longer competent to manage her assets." They rolled out statements from a few witnesses. A neighbor said I often forgot to lock the door. A wedding guest claimed I shouted irrationally. Listening, I felt the weight of it, but I didn't waver. Perry tapped my hand lightly, a reminder. Steady. "Our turn is coming." When it was, Perry stood. He spread the documents on the lectern and spoke firmly. "Your Honor, we submit the medical report from Dr. Simmons, a nationally recognized psychiatrist. The conclusion is clear. Miss Margaret Wallace is fully competent, with complete cognitive and decision-making capacity." A murmur rose in the courtroom. Perry continued. "We also have video evidence showing Miss Vanessa Dawson, Miss Wallace's daughter-in-law, bringing a real estate agent to measure Miss Wallace's home without her consent. We further have records of calls and documents showing Mr. Daniel Hughes inquiring months ago about procedures to obtain guardianship over his mother's assets." He paused and looked straight at the judge. "This is not a son's concern for his mother. This is an organized attempt to seize assets." I saw Vanessa start to fidget, her face flushing red. Daniel dropped his head, fingers laced tight. When I was called to the stand, I stood and took a deep breath. My voice didn't shake. It was clear and measured. "Your Honor, I stayed silent for too long. I thought if I endured, things would settle down, but silence turned me into a victim. On my son's wedding night, I was humiliated in front of hundreds, accused of selfishness, threatened with a nursing home. I had no choice but to tell the truth. I opened my case file and held out bank statements. Over the past 3 years, I transferred more than $120,000 to cover credit cards, rent, and even the wedding expenses for Daniel and Vanessa. I did it because I thought I was helping, but they treated me like a bottomless bank. When I refused to hand over my house, they decided to declare me incompetent." My voice tightened, but I continued. "I'm not here to fight my son. I'm here to defend the truth and to protect the dignity of a mother who spent her life for her child." The courtroom grew heavy. I saw a few reporters bend over their notebooks, scribbling fast. The other side's attorney tried to jump in, claiming I was acting competent on purpose. But Perry immediately played the video of my interview with Dr. Simmons, me answering clearly, recalling dates, even reciting by heart a poem Thomas had loved. No one could call me delusional after that. The judge looked over the file, then tapped the gavel lightly. "The court needs time for careful review. For now, all of Miss Margaret Wallace's asset management rights remain intact. The court will also open a preliminary inquiry into possible false statements by the plaintiff's witnesses." A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. Vanessa practically screamed, "This isn't fair! She's fooling everyone!" The judge hit the gavel again, stern. "Order in the court!" I sat down, feeling lighter. It was only the first step, but I knew the door to justice had opened. When I left the courthouse, a group of reporters came over. They asked if I was afraid of losing my family's love. I kept it short. Love can't survive on greed and lies. I still love my son, but I can't love betrayal. That night, back home on the porch, I listened to the waves. My heart still hurt, but in that pain was peace. I had dared to stand up, to bring the truth into the light. I knew this was only the beginning of the fight, but I wasn't alone anymore. Outside, the night sky glittered with stars. I whispered to Thomas, "You see, I did the right thing, and I'll keep going until they understand that greed has a price." On the day of the final ruling, Tampa's sky was a deep blue, the sun shining bright as if to wash away the last of the gloom. I climbed the marble steps into the courthouse, lighter than I'd felt in months. I'd lived under crushing tension between love and betrayal, trust and fear. But today, I could feel a new beginning waiting. The judge read the verdict, voice clear, each word hitting straight to my heart. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, the court denies the guardianship petition of Daniel Hughes and Vanessa Dawson. Due to signs of fraud, the court refers the file to the district attorney for further investigation. Miss Margaret Wallace retains full control of her assets and is recognized as fully competent. The gavel struck, sharp and dry, but to me it was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. Vanessa dropped into her seat, eyes wide. Daniel covered his face, shoulders shaking like he couldn't believe what he'd heard. I looked at my son, my heart ached, but no longer the way it once did. Some lessons a person has to pay for themselves. Outside, reporters waited. Cameras flashed, microphones pointed at me. I smiled and kept it brief. Justice isn't revenge, it's protection. Today I was protected not just by the law, but by the truth. That line ran in several papers the next morning. A few even called me the woman who challenged ageist stereotypes. I'm not used to media lights, but I felt strangely calm. I wasn't a silent victim anymore. In the days that followed, I returned to my routine in the house by the sea. Each morning I took my coffee to the porch and watched the waves. The gulls chattered. The salty wind brushed my face. Little things worry had buried, now precious again. I felt reborn. One afternoon, Joseph stopped by with a small radio. He set it on the kitchen table and played a jazz tune Thomas loved. The familiar sound filled the room and my eyes stung. Joseph smiled gently. "Margaret, you fought through a hard war. Now let music and friends bring you back to life." I nodded, tears falling as I smiled. After all this time, I realized what I needed wasn't the money, it was peace in my heart, the ability to hold my head high. I also joined a local community group, older adults sharing stories of financial or emotional abuse by family. I told my journey, from insults to plans for a nursing home, to the moment I stood in court. People listened, some cried, some squeezed my hand and whispered, "You gave us hope that we can protect ourselves, too." I never thought I'd be anyone's support. But that made one thing clear: my pain wasn't unique. So many elders suffer quietly because they believe old people should stay silent. I can't change everything, but I can start small, share, and lift others up. Daniel disappeared from my life for a long time. I heard rumors he and Vanessa fought constantly over mounting debt, eventually leaving their fancy apartment for a smaller rental. I heard it with a quiet sadness. My son chose that path. Now he had to learn to stand on his own feet. One evening, I got a short letter with no return address, the handwriting shaky. "Mom, I'm sorry. I let greed blind me. I'm not brave enough to face you yet, but I hope one day you'll forgive me." I read it over and over, tears blotting the page. Forgive him? I didn't know when my heart would be wide enough for that. But at least I knew Daniel had begun to see his mistake. That was a small light in the dark. I folded the letter and put it in the wooden box holding our family keepsakes. I didn't want to erase the past. It had forged me into the woman I am now. Each morning when sunlight pours through the living room window, my chest opens. I started writing my story not as an indictment, but as a message to those in the same place. Don't let anyone steal your voice, not even family. Silence is a one-way ticket to the pain, despair. Stand up even late is still on time. With each page, I felt reborn. No longer the trembling woman at a wedding, nor the cornered defendant in court. I am Margaret Wallace, a mother, a widow, and above all, a person who knows the true worth of dignity and freedom. Life can be rough seas, but after the storm, the water is still blue and so is my heart. From the day I walked out of the courthouse with a just ruling, my life turned a page. No more midnight nightmares, no flinching at a knock on the door or a strange envelope. I returned to simple rhythms: a hot coffee at dawn, waves on the rocks, afternoon walks on soft, damp sand. Ordinary things, now priceless. A young reporter once came to interview me. She sat across from me, eyes bright, voice full of admiration. "Miss Margaret, do you think you're a hero? You stood up to your family and told the truth." I smiled and shook my head. "I'm not a hero. I'm a mother who stayed too quiet, and when silence nearly destroyed everything, I had to speak." Anyone can do that, if they truly believe they deserve respect. After she left, I sat with my thoughts. What I gained wasn't just a legal win. The biggest thing I found was my own voice, the one I'd lost in years of keeping my head down. I remember that night at the safe, opening Thomas's letters. He wrote, "Silence can be strength, but when others turn it into a weapon against you, you must answer with the truth." I did exactly what he hoped I would. People in the community kept coming. They told their stories: mothers manipulated by their children, old men belittled by daughters-in-law, grandmothers pushed to the edges of their own homes. Each story hurt, but I didn't feel hopeless anymore. I started sharing what I'd learned. Seek help, speak up, keep evidence. One evening, the group asked me to speak. I looked out at the many lined faces and worried eyes, and I spoke from the heart. We are not invisible. We are not burdens. We are people who have lived, loved, and sacrificed. No one has the right to take our dignity, not even those who share our blood. Remember, when we stay silent, we hand them power. When we speak, we take ourselves back. Applause filled the room. I saw red eyes and clasped hands. In that moment, I knew my story wasn't just mine. It echoed for thousands living the same pain. Daniel still hasn't returned. I don't know where he is, what he's doing, or whether he's escaped the debt spiral, but I'm not haunted anymore. I've left a space in my heart for him, the small hope that one day he'll truly wake up. Even if that day never comes, I'm okay. I've learned to love myself first. One morning, I walked along the beach, fine sand sliding between my toes, waves brushing my ankles. The sunrise cast gold across the water. I breathed deep, alive, and full. I whispered to myself, "Margaret, you've been reborn." Yes, reborn not because I'm young again, but because I found an inner strength I never knew I had. I don't shake at insults or fear legal schemes. I've seen the darkest stretch, and from there, I found my light. I started journaling daily, capturing thoughts and memories. Maybe one day I'll gather them into a small book, not to sell, but to give to those who need hope. I want them to know that even when pressed by those closest to you, you can still stand up and walk your own path. And today, as I write this, I want to leave one final message to anyone listening to my story. Never believe you're too old to stand up for yourself. Don't let silence turn into shackles. Remember, your dignity and freedom belong to you. No one can take them unless you hand them over. If I, a 68-year-old woman once labeled senile, could find justice, you can too. Speak up, seek help, and believe you're worthy. I closed the notebook and looked out at the open sea. The sun had climbed high, lighting the long ribbon of sand ahead. I smiled, full of gratitude for Thomas, for the friends who walked with me, and for myself, for refusing to give up. And if you're hearing this, I just want to say, thank you for staying with me. My story might be someone's pain and someone else's hope. If you've been through something similar, share your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. And if this story touched you, please subscribe and turn on notifications so voices like ours never fade into silence. I pressed my hands together and whispered, "Thank you, life, for a second chance." Out there, the waves kept rolling in steadfast, a reminder. Life can knock you down, but if you stand back up, you come out stronger than ever.